All right, we'll go ahead and call the Sandy City Council work session to order, joint meeting with the Sandy Planning Commission. I always do a quick review of the agenda. It's pretty light this evening. It's a comprehensive plan update for our visioning outreach. Welcome, Chris. And I see that we have Jan Lee and Lori Smallwood both online on Zoom for us. Jordan, would you like to?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Just need to call the roll. I'm all around.
Would you like me to call the planning commission as well, Mayor?
Just call the council.
Okay. Councilor Pizzo?
Here.
Councilor Smallwood?
Here.
Councilor Sheldon?
Excuse for until he gets here.
Okay.
Here.
Okay. Councilor Walker?
Here.
Councilor Exner?
Here.
Councilor Hookinson? Here. Mayor Podium?
Here. Thank you. All right, let's get this started.
Yeah, I'm pleased to introduce Annie Mate, who's with 3J Consulting. She's going to be giving a presentation, and I think the PowerPoint is included in the packet so you can follow along. But give a briefing on the project status, in particular where we're at with the visioning and all the outreach that's been going on as part of this process, and some of a lot of the information that they've discovered with this outreach, which I really appreciate seeing all that data assembled in there and reading the comments. Pretty exciting stuff so far. So I'm going to turn it over to Annie. She has I think, a presentation all lined up. And as we just heard from roll call, the Planning Commission was invited to this briefing too. They're an important body involved with this work.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Appreciate you having me back. It's been a couple of months and I think about 8 or 9 of them over the course of this work. So excited to just come back and report on all of the work that's been going on the last couple of months and then what we are gearing up for next. So I always like to start with just a quick refresher on what the overall process is for this multi-year kind of large scale project and the schedule. So for the vision and the comprehensive plan process, I'm thinking about it in ideally 2 phases. So the first phase is developing a series of background reports, collecting factual data and information about some of the key topics that are included in the comprehensive plan, so housing, transportation, economic development. While kind of that data collection and analysis is happening on in the background, we're doing a lot of engagement and outreach early and often in this process to identify a vision for the comprehensive plan. So we've, as you all know and have voted on, the Envision Sandy 2050 is the tagline, and that's really where we're focusing the bulk of our outreach. But yeah, there's certainly a lot going on at the same time. All of that leads to a new set of goals and policies for the comprehensive plan, asking ourselves, how do we get there? So how do we get there from this broad vision statement for where we want to be going? And all of that lends itself to a comprehensive plan document, so an updated document that includes the vision statement for 2050 that is driven and developed by the community. It also includes key information from the background reports that were presented as part of this project. And then that lends itself to goal statements and a series of policies for each of the thematic areas of the comprehensive plan, which link themselves to the statewide planning goals. And we are here kind of at the very beginning. So we are still in the visioning process. Another way to kind of look at this process diagram is also through this graphic project schedule. My apologies if it's very small on the screen. But you'll see that the community visioning and goal setting will bring us through this fall. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of data collection and analysis happening behind the scenes while we're doing this outreach, and that will lend itself into the comprehensive plan update. So establishing a new policy framework for your comprehensive plan starting in January 2023. There will be a lot going on for this project between about January to summer of next year, and that will lead to the adoption proceedings that we hope to start summer or fall of next year. Any questions on the project schedule or process?
I have a question. The ultimate product of our comp plan is our comprehensive plan zoning map. And where does that show up or come into play in this process?
Yeah, great question. So this current scope of work doesn't lend itself to an updated zoning map. The zoning map itself is an implementation tool of the comprehensive plan document. However, the zoning map is definitely can be a key important part of the overall project. But in responding to the RFP, we really focused on developing an updated policy framework for the document. So at this current time, the scope doesn't include an updated zoning map, but there can be
Could be
further
some-
conversations about that.
Yeah, and that could be something that staff implements as we implement policy in the direction of the planning commission. Council. Take the comprehensive plan and then
So that's
that's one of the tools that we use. is-
part of adoption then? Is that what we're saying on the schedule? It's in the adoption before, after?
After.
I mean, that's a pretty costly process to do. And so I just kind of thought, and it's the thing that most of the public, cares about as far as what's getting built next to my house kind of thing.
It is a costly thing to do with zoning and measure 49 notices and all that.
Right.
Part
And
of it.
so I'm a little bit concerned and disappointed that we don't have that as part of the process, because that's kind of really the key thing. It's one thing to have kind of grandiose plans and visions and all that stuff. That's really important. But the bottom line is we need to be able to use this as a tool for decision-making, and people need to understand what, how the zoning map kind of gets us to these visions. So I'm concerned that because I think that's kind of where we really need to get the public involved.
Well, I think we need to get them involved at the beginning.
Sure.
We're right, and that
Yeah,
leads.
right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
visioning
all
and stuff,
along, and
but,
that
yeah.
leads, to what the
Yeah.
zoning maps are. But I think that's what the public expects will be an outcome, is their input will then lead to these zoning maps. Absolutely.
And it will be also interesting, as the development of the actual document itself comes together, to understand from city council and to also understand from planning commission, what are the, when you make land use decisions or decisions around public investments, how do you use the comprehensive plan document? How do what do you rely on? What kind of information do you rely on in the document itself? And then what kind of information do you rely on in the zoning map? And then there can be, we can work to make sure that this document meets the needs that you have when making those types of decisions. And then also, what you need out of a new zoning map as well.
So Jordan, why don't we, tell me, unless you have a different path, why don't we plan on maybe you and Kelly huddling at, not right now, but after, and then kind of reporting back what it might look like, what a process would look like to implement this in the zoning maps?
Yeah, and even beyond that, what are other things that are. City codes too. So what do you expect as outcomes coming out of the adoption of the new comprehensive plan? Basically, the roadmap to policies, it's a nice big document with all this public input. And then it's like, okay, what are the little tools that we then use? So yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, I was gonna just say one, you wouldn't want to actually have any zone map changes together with the comp plan adoption, because if you get any measure 49 things, taking things, that will go to litigation and hold up the whole process. Nobody will adopt it, because it'd be part of the comp plan. So the comp plan is just setting the policies and the goals, and then later on you come through with a separate process if you want to look at zone changes. You wouldn't want to do those at the same time.
Well, I think they're kind of an iterative thing. I get it. You wouldn't want to finalize the zoning
Correct.
map, but how many acres of high and medium density we already have now needs to be informing our policies.
Oh, absolutely. And I would just reiterate, so your economic opportunities now, there's a lot of technical work going on in the background, economic opportunities analysis and potentially this housing needs analysis. But as part of that work, there is a buildable lands inventory that is done. So you are able to identify vacant and developable land and trends and forecasts regarding employment and housing. So those numbers are going to be generated throughout this process. They don't necessarily lend themselves to a new zoning map, but they definitely inform policy, and that can definitely inform updates to a zoning map.
Well, the map itself is crucial, but I think also the review and the understanding and being able to make up those zones and what goes on in those zones is as crucial as the map is. What time do you see that process being built?
The process of the zoning map.
Describing the zones and what goes on within each, what's allowed.
Yes,
I know that there are some
Mhm.
zones that I'm particularly want to be interested in seeing us get rid of the village zone in the previous, never really got off to a very good start. So I know there's going to be some changes there. When do you see that process
Yeah,
occurring?
so in the development of so usually comprehensive plans do actually identify and describe at a very high level, of course, it's not your development code, but do describe the general uses that are found in each of these zones. So when we do review kind of land use as a thematic area in the comprehensive plan, there is an opportunity to, given community values or priorities, redefine a bit what those zones might mean. Now, those zones are more specifically defined in your development code, and that would probably be where you want to be doing the bulk of your changes if there are significant
So
changes.
This process wouldn't include any of that?
Not an update to the development code. So in terms of the implementation tools for the comprehensive plan, it's things like a zoning map, updating your development code, creating work plan, like departmental work plans. These are all implementing tools of a comprehensive plan. So that would be
Yeah.
separate or
I guess I'm kind of with
process.
Yeah, so if
Catherine
you,
at the moment.
if you start
I think that's a
changing,
pretty important piece of what we're doing. For example, my village example, I suspect that's going to be one of those we'll look at very strongly, but there's going to be a lot of other things too.
so the village commercial thing,
Density issues.
yeah, so I don't think that would be that problematic because I think most people that have village commercial don't want it to be village commercial. So you're not going to probably get any claims, and I don't even believe it would actually be open to Measure 49 claims because it's not residential land or farmland.
Mhm.
The problematic
Right.
thing is when you start down zoning residential property. That's when you get into litigation because it's open to Measure 49 claims. So if we did decide we wanted to do that, my take you would want to do a zone change property by property because each one of those could be held up separately through a litigation effort. So say if you identified 10 properties you want to change from R3 to SFR,
Sure.
I think you'd want to do 10 separate ordinances and 10 separate zone changes.
We may include land that we don't have currently zoned in this process. My expectation is we'll look at some of those on the outer edges that maybe are part of the county at the moment.
That would be a
Okay, on
separate
those.
process as well, a UGB expansion or UGB swap.
Yeah.
That would also
right.
be a separate process. Yeah.
Those will be identifying
Yeah.
newly zones. though.
Not just.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told by the state, I don't want to get us
None of
off
this is
track
gonna
too
be
much, but
easy, I know that,
we've expanded our UGB, one big one and then that really tiny one,
right?
which is the most UGB expansions in the last 10 years for a city in the state of Oregon. So I think it's going to be very difficult in a year or two to do another UGB expansion. So I just want to prime you for that.
Right.
That's going to be a very big uphill climb for the city of Sandy to try to achieve.
Yes.
As I said, we just did it.
Yeah.
When I just didn't do it, but for me, it feels like we just did it. 'cause,
We
Yeah.
did.
6 years ago.
6 years ago, but then the scheme of
So many,
things.
so many politics things have changed in the last, call it 5 years, that I suspect that there will be a lot of analysis of those zones to see if we are still following within those rules. And
The-
my guess is when we move that map into place, there'll be a lot of eyes scrutinizing that.
So we're already looking at through the EOA, which is part of the comp plan contract and scope of work. We're already actually doing that. And we already met with our EOA stakeholder group in late July and showed them the needs analysis. And it's showing about 30 or 40 acres of commercial industrial land that we need to expand into over the next.
So we are going to
Can
be
you repeat
expanding.
that? I'm sorry, EOA and. you're
Yeah,
already
so the
meeting
EOA
with
is the
who?
economic opportunities analysis, and that's part of the existing scope of work with Eco Northwest and 3J, who Annie Ismate is from. And so they're already actually looking at all the employment lands, commercial, industrial, all that. And they've already actually came up with formulas based on historic trends and anticipated trends that will show we'll need about an extra 30 to 40 acres of commercial and industrial land by 2045.
So we are
now-
going to be changing some of the acreages. We're going to be looking at new zones at different locations.
No, that's just identifying that you would need to expand by that amount.
Goals.
The
So
next
that'll-
step would
okay.
be to then actually go through a UGB expansion process, which as you probably remember from before, that's a 2 to 3 year process in
Oh,
itself.
yeah, yeah.
The HNA that you'll be hopefully approving to add to the scope later tonight, that is just like the EOA, which I just described, except for housing. So that will be looking at in 2045, what is our housing look, or what does our residential lands look like? And will we have a shortage? Or what can we do to accommodate the growth needs for residential?
And I'll just, I mean, I was kind of pushing that because we're getting pushed to increase density here at the state level in Sandy. And we already have a large amount of land already zoned at R3 and R2 to meet those needs. We need to have a balance. But now what we're doing is getting pushed to put increased density on SFR and those lower density ones. And that's where I want to figure out how do we fight that, because we need to have the whole, we kind of got spanked because we just got put into the big lumped in. And so that's the kind of policy changes that I want to be able to look at to see how can we maintain our SFR larger lot stuff. Because what happens is a lot of times people move to Sandy to get an affordable home, and then they move out into the unincorporated area because they want a bigger yard, and they don't have that option here in Sandy. They can't find a bigger yard. So those are the kind of policies. I think I get it. I mean, I think when we first got sold on the comp plan, I honestly thought that's what we were doing was a new map. And and I get the comp, obviously doing the comp plan stuff, but I didn't realize they were totally separate steps that, not only separate steps, but also more monies. Now we need to allocate a bunch more money for these subsequent steps, which is a little bit of a aha moment for us tonight. But if that's where we have to go, then I guess that's where we head.
Just so you know, I don't think there's going to be like a lot of extra money allocated to that. That would be mainly a staff effort. We'd probably get some assistance from a consulting firm, but that's honestly not, I don't anticipate that being a huge money deal, but I mean, I can't make that a promise, but I don't anticipate that, just so you know.
Good to know. Thanks.
Mayor?
Please.
So I got kind of a rough introduction to the comp plan when I sat through my first land use decision. And I went to the comp plan to defend a justification and quickly got notified by the attorney that comp plans are nice, but that's not what we make our decisions off of. So I've come to understand now the difference in the value of setting these goals and policies at this very high level within the implementation and separating that from the implementation. And then understanding that if there's a gap between our implementation, be it code or zone map or anything else, that's incumbent on the council to address and prioritize. And if we don't, then the comp plan is just paper, right?
That's
So
100% correct.
So at this point, for me, I'm comfortable making sure we got those high level goals, that we've got the community involvement, and that we're more or less aligned, because it will make it easier, I think, to come back, especially as councils change over time, to come back and align those code changes within the comp plan.
It gives us the guidelines of where the community want to take the city.
Yeah.
And without it, we don't hear it.
Going back to those nested bowls of governance, this is a big one on top, and everything else has to, or however you want to use that metaphor, everything else has to fit with it.
Great. All right.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
No,
please.
I really appreciate the discussion. And I think what you just mentioned about just the hierarchy of information is so key here. And I really do have empathy and understand the difficulty of working through these various levels of information. Yeah, the purpose here is really to reset and establish a new policy framework that can then trickle into all of these various tools and mechanisms that you have to be able to guide land use decisions. So yeah. Excellent. Well, I will continue on in the high level here. There's been a lot of work that's been going on in the last couple of months. So I'm here to just report back on what we've been doing, what we've heard. I know that your packet is rather thick tonight. There's a lot of raw data from all of our outreach, but it's been really exciting. And before I start, I do want to say your associate planner, Shelley Dennison, has been out in the community nonstop over the last couple of months. And it's been really great to see the work that's been coming out of that. So just a quick overview, we had a multiple pronged approach when it came to launching this work and really creating the campaign around this visioning process that informs the comp plan. I will just mention, there's a reason that we do kind of this, campaign style outreach at the beginning of a big process like this, because we're really trying to build community leaders. We're trying to connect with community leaders and really just kind of build momentum for this work. Sometimes it's a lot easier for folks to grasp onto the questions that we ask at the beginning of a process like this around community visioning than it is when you start getting into the nitpicky things. So really this kind of outreach engagement that we've done over the last 6 months is very high level, but it is really meant to try and orient ourselves in the direction that we're trying to go and really understand what those priorities are from the community. So we did a number of things. We were at a variety of community events over the summer. We hosted a number of community conversations, which I'll explain. And then we also had an online survey that just kind of supported all of these in-person activities as well. So where did we go over the course of the summer? We had a really awesome and successful event at Sandy High School in May, which I'll talk about in a moment. We also had an informational booth at the Longest Day Parkway event, at a couple of farmers market events this summer, as well as at the Sandy Mountain Festival. And the purpose of just, being a presence at these events was really to draw attention to this project, make it visible. Make it visible and really answer questions and start kind of having these one-on-one quality discussions with folks that were coming by. So I'll start with the Sandy High School event. This was kind of a cross between a community conversation and a full-on event, but essentially we engaged over 250 high school students with the help of one of our CAC members who is a student herself at Sandy High School. We hosted a number of focus group discussions with the leadership class, and then we had a pretty large-scale senior advisory class event as well, where we were really kind of engaging kids around what they loved about their community, what they wanted to see in the future. So really fun to talk to kids that live here in Sandy about what they want to see in the next 20 years.
And we'll probably still be alive in 2050 to see it.
And hopefully here.
Plan to be like 2050.
Just some photos of just our outreach and the focus groups. All of this work happened over the course of about a week or so. We were on campus 3 days that week. Lots of community conversations and focus groups in that event. As I mentioned, Longest Day Parkway event, we had a booth set up there. So very visible. We've got the logo and the branding kind of on top of everything we create. So really hoping to just kind of gain momentum and traction and visibility through this work. We also had a booth at the farmers market in May and June. And just a quick side note, in terms of this booth, really our hope there was to just provide some information about the project, show people what this process is, what is even a comprehensive plan to begin with, and then really drive folks to having a discussion around what they really love about where they live and what they want to see in the future. Also at the Sandy Mountain Festival, this was really fun. We worked with Nelly Rodriguez, who's been on this project since the beginning. She runs a very famous talk show, a Spanish talk show in Oregon called Cita con Nelly. She was here at the Sandy Mountain Festival. They did some Spanish language intercept surveys as well as English language intercept surveys. And so that was really nice to have just that extra visibility at the Sandy Mountain Festival. So beyond the community events, we also hosted a number of community conversations. We hosted one with the Planning Commission in June, but essentially they are kind of smaller focus group discussions centered around talking to people about, once again, what they love about where they live, what are those kind of the key values and what are the key values for folks regarding where they live and why they love being here, and then what are kind of their priorities, aspirations, or concerns for the future. These community conversations were led by both city staff, myself, but as well as some of our community advisory committee members. We had a little kit that was available online, so really anyone could host and lead a discussion and send us their notes. We had 12 community conversations with a variety of city boards and committees, as well as some neighborhood or some community organizations as well. So that was really a great opportunity to have a more nuanced discussion with folks that are involved in the Sandy community in some capacity. And then finally, throughout all of this work, we always like to drive folks to an online platform where they can provide more feedback. So we did have an online survey that just kind of paralleled all of our efforts. It was live from March to August. It's a reminder that these are very qualitative surveys. They're not statistically significant in any manner. We had 155 online survey respondents. We also decided to print out some paper copies and put them in the library and at some senior center or at the senior center. And then I think also an assisted living facility. So we didn't get a lot of responses there, but we did our best to put it out in a lot of different places. But overall, we did get a lot of traffic to the Sandy Speaks project webpage for this, which is really what feels important here, because that's where all of the information about this work is. So those were generally the activities. I'll pause here if anybody has some thoughts or feedback, or if anybody engaged in any of this work or saw it around town.
Sure, Carl.
I did get involved in a couple different of these. My question though is, you got a lot of input, some of individuals, some groups really knew what they're talking about. Some groups were dreamers and on and on and on. All important, but, and then I'm assuming that some of these groups came up with some pretty common themes and stuff. So there was some of that.
Yeah.
So how do you put this whole mix together? So do you take the individual who thinks he wants to have, or she, some sort of thing in the city that really doesn't look very logical, very reasonable. How do you compare that with something where you have a group of, like, say, 10 different people, individuals, groups saying, oh, we all want this? How do you correlate those differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say it's an art and a science, but a lot of this work and a lot of the feedback that we're getting, the purpose is to identify kind of the very, very kind of higher level themes that would then constitute the vision statement. So I am always kind of looking for what is the thread, the connection thread between all these various levels of information and feedback that we're getting. We are working still, this outreach is still geared towards this vision statement. So it's pretty high level. And so we're really trying to get at not, what does a building look like, or what this person should do with their property per se, but what is the sentiment behind that? Is it preserving land? Is it beautifying Main Street? Like trying to identify what is the sentiment behind maybe some more specific comments or feedback. So that's kind of how we're trying to put it all together. We'll be coming back to you in the fall with just, how we read through this and what we got out of it, and what kind of vision statement we put together based on that feedback. And we'll certainly be looking to your guidance as whether or not you feel like that's on the right track, if that's reflective of what you've been hearing, and based on the raw data that we also have in the packet.
And the last question, and I'll be quiet, is do you see any empty data gaps? People groups that we thought we wanted to get to, but didn't seem to bring them in. Whatever else.
Yeah, no, that's, I think we preemptively tried to do our best to cover some certain groups that are generally a little bit harder to reach. I think engaging youth in these types of processes is often overlooked, and it's very appreciated. So we have a CAC member who's a high school student. We did this outreach at the high school, and we felt really strongly about doing that work and kind of reaching that group, that population group. Another population group that also, is generally kind of harder to reach are renters, Spanish-speaking community members. Having Nelly Rodriguez from her Cita Con Nelly webpage was is so amazing. I forgot that I had one more slide in the outreach, but she did a ton of Spanish-focused outreach throughout this process, kind of parallel to her own efforts. She has a very strong social media gathering or social media presence. So we were feeding her information on the online survey. We were feeding her kind of information about the community events, and then she was putting that out herself. She also just kind of does a lot of informal gatherings and is really connected to some of the community members here in Sandy and actually all of Clackamas County. So she was at St. Michael's Catholic Church. And I think kind of her approach to engaging the Spanish community around these types of kind of high level questions is really having informal conversations with people, and then just documenting what those conversations were like. So it's not a technical, it's not like any scientific approach per se, but it's just generally how she's able to connect with that community. So I think that was also just a really powerful thing to have on it throughout this outreach process. I would say, as I mentioned, the renter population is certainly a population that we struggle to reach. That's why we put some paper surveys in the apartment complex. What was it, the Vista apartment complex? The Avenir, yeah. So we checked in pretty regularly over the past couple of months, being like, where could we do more of, or what could we do? I know there was a little bit of interest in reaching some more like resident populations in Sandy. And so we had a CAC member that actually this month was hoping to try and connect some of her own neighbors. So we've been trying to kind of identify that as we go and see what we can do and whatnot. So.
Catherine?
On this kind of similar note, I think my interest is really, and I can kind of tell from a lot of the comments that we got, is that, a lot of the people, they're part of the Sandy community, but they're not a city tax-paying resident. And so, the Sandy High School, those kids live anywhere from Boring to Government Camp, right? The farmer's market, the Sandy Mountain Festival, they could live anywhere. And so, and it's kind of good to get that input and all. I appreciate that. Obviously, the Longest Day Parkway event, I think, was mostly residents. And like you were just kind of talking about, I'm really interested in hearing from the residents in Sandy that are affected, because so many of these people live outside the city limits, and they're never going to have an apartment building, built right next to them. And, they want Sandy, their town to provide all these amenities, and yet they're not getting taxed for those. So those kind of dynamics that we have here, it's really important in this process to, put a megaphone out for the folks that are within the city limits that are going to be affected by these policies. Because obviously, I don't think a lot of those Sandy community residents even know where, that they aren't, not within the city limits. They're kind of clueless about that. So, and that's understandable. But how do we kind of increase that megaphone for the city residents within city limits?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, something that is just can be really hard to try and figure out. I think a key kind of activity that was really good for reaching that segment was those community conversations. I think that having community conversations with things like the Sandy Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce and Ant Farm Advisory Board, and people that really are invested in work in Sandy and understand how the city works to some degree, is kind of where we try to get to, Sandy residents specifically. In these kind of outreach activities, it's really hard to sift through at the farmer's market, like who lives in Sandy, who doesn't live in Sandy. I think that for the purpose of developing this very high level vision statement, we're listening to some key themes that I think are general enough that, like, whether you're live within city limits or you live outside of city limits, most folks would probably agree to. I wouldn't say, I don't know if I have it personally a magic pill for that, but I definitely understand that desire to have that megaphone out for the Sandy city communities or community members. I guess in response to in the development of the comprehensive plan, there are multiple rounds of outreach and engagement around this process, specifically around the development of the comp plan. So there will be some more focused and targeted outreach opportunities around some more specific thematic areas or topic areas of the comprehensive plan. And that's another opportunity to really kind of target our outreach for, people that have lived experience in Sandy around a certain thing, or folks that have general expertise or knowledge about something or about a topic area in Sandy specifically. So there are more opportunities to do that in the development of the comp plan, which I think might be maybe the more important place to be doing that targeted outreach.
Mayor, quick comment, this is a 25-year plan, and those kids going to high school are going to live in 14 different places, some of which will come back to live in Sandy, whether they started out or not. And few people stay in the same spot for 25 years. So I think having that broad perspective, even though they're maybe outside the boundaries, it's probably appropriate. If we're trying to establish Sandy as the place that we want to be, it's nice to have that perspective beyond just the residents who might be here.
I agree. Both you, Stan, and I grew up outside the city limits.
Right.
We called Sandy home.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand Kathleen's point too. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
fall
Yeah.
deaf on those years either, but, so I think there's a good perspective from all those.
I mean, when it comes time to implement code, at that point, I think a Sandy resident definitely has more weight than something else that's.
Oh, 100%.
I just wanted to quickly chime in just to, as an answer to that question about filtering down to Sandy specific residents. The online survey, because people who took that survey needed to register for the engagement for Sandy Speaks for the website. One of the registration questions was to look at a map and select the area of the city you live in, or to select I don't live in city limits. And so, or I don't live in any of these areas. And so we're able to filter all of the responses to see, okay, what do folks inside city limits have to say? What do folks outside of city limits have to say? We can even get a little more specific than that. So
Yeah.
that's, the survey can kind of help figure
Yeah.
that out.
That's why she's certified.
There you go.
Thanks.
Alright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, going back to how do we all put this together? So
That's
just
a favorite.
to let you know, the outreach truly just kind of wrapped up this last week. So we have kind of updated the spreadsheet that is in your packet. There's some new content that is coming, or some new data that came in the last week or so. But we have started reading through all of the feedback and notes that we got through all these various activities, compile them into the spreadsheet, reading every single one of these comments and notes, and then starting to identify some key ideas, some key statements. And really the purpose of reading through all of this work is to start building a language bank that we can then use to develop the vision statement. Really want a vision statement to be reflective of the way people talk about Sandy, the way that people describe places, describe things in Sandy. So reading through all of these materials is really important for identifying what kind of language are people using to describe things. And so that's kind of where we are, and we're still kind of in the midst of all of this raw data over the next month or so, and we're going to be using it to guide the development of the language and the vision statement. I can give a little snapshot of kind of what we're thinking about, or sorry, what we've been reading when it comes to this raw data. The very first thing that feels interesting to do is creating a word cloud and seeing what are the words that keep coming up when we ask people what they love about Sandy and then what they want to see in the future. So we did a very preliminary review of the feedback that we had gotten by July and came up with some key themes and key ideas that were reoccurring in that feedback. I would say that there's nothing extremely surprising, or maybe there is in your review at this point in time.
Just the Portland one, was there a knot in front of that? Or?
Yes, likely, very likely. Yeah. So in terms of just, things that people kept repeating often when asked, what makes Sandy special today, a lot of comment and feedback on nature and recreation access, the ability to have all these various parks and trail systems and this green space around town. The small town feel is a very, very common sentiment that came up almost in everything we did. It'll be interesting to try and unpack that a little bit further as to what does that mean, small town feel. Local businesses were highlighted. Just having a friendly community. I think a lot of the feedback really centered on people and the kind of the feeling of connectedness and neighbors. So that was very common. Community events and programs. SandyNet was actually mentioned quite a bit as an attribute of the community.
Peeps
So
also
why
have a
was
lot
it-
of kids.
So is there any correlation to the bigger font versus the smaller font?
No, so,
Because I'm wondering on that.
yeah,
Just,
I have- yeah.
Left out, buddy?
So the text that is on the slide is actually just the literal text from the raw data. And then kind of what I'm repeating out are just some like synthesized ideas from all of this raw data. History, safety, and low crime rates in Sandy, having a family-friendly community. Folks talked a lot about the schools, the farmers market, downtown, the beautification of downtown. I will actually say one small thing that I heard repeatedly was the flower baskets on Main Street. I heard from Sandy High School students and the Ant Farm Advisory Board. So just this idea of like beautification of Main Street, I heard multiple times. That rural feel, fire and police response, cleanliness, inclusivity, tourism, the SAM transit service, housing affordability and housing options. And yeah, that's just kind of a smattering of what we kind of picked at or read from our first reading of the data.
Are you kind of looking for things that we don't already really appreciate? So if somebody said, we don't want traffic in the downtown part of Sandy, or we want to have, I don't know, whatever it might be that was a surprise. Was there anything that showed up that looked like
Yeah,
we
certainly.
don't have, but we would like to have a
Right,
lot of?
so there was kind of two parts to this outreach. First focusing on what do we have now that we love? And then the second part is what do we want to see in the future? You know, there's definitely, we don't love to lead discussions with what do you want to change? What are you concerned about? Trying to kind of focus on positivity, but we can definitely pick out concerns. You know, we can infer concerns around certain things based on what, you know, aspirations there are. So I, you know, certainly if I will go to the next slide, and the next question was, you know, what about Sandy would you like to change in the future? So kind of leads to that question. And lots of things. I would say, you know, limiting growth and reducing traffic. People.
Wipe us all out, right over there. Okay.
It's all over the map. And so the work is really trying to just put this together in a coherent way.
I don't see council in a big font, so that's good.
Yeah, I think you're off the hook.
Well, one of our names in there.
Attracting business was a big thing that was repeated over and over. Updating infrastructure, addressing crime and safety. So, you know, something I did kind of see in this feedback is there are a lot of things that people love about Sandy today. And then when asked about what they want to see in the future, it's usually kind of the same stuff, but better or in a different way. So, you know, they love their local businesses. They want to attract more. They love their community amenities. They want more community amenities. So kind of, there's definitely some interesting interplay of themes here between these two questions. Addressing crime and safety issues, love low crime rates. So things like that. Increasing affordability, improving walkability, more planning around natural hazards was also a big one. Improving cleanliness, having more living wage jobs, better transportation, increased tourism, a more vibrant downtown. So these are kind of the key things that were coming up in that second set.
I like how you put traffic and then right by the T, little itty bitty font, lights.
Traffic lights. Right.
You know.
Yeah. This is
That's just something that's come up a lot, right?
Yeah,
So that's why I
absolutely.
think. Yeah.
These, you know, these word clouds just kind of help orient ourselves. It's the first thing we try to do before we actually do a deep dive. So there's, yeah, this is certainly not a science, but it's certainly helpful to just kind of get a visual
No,
picture of
less
what we're
traffic.
reading.
They want to
Oh,
change the
less.
traffic lights. right?
So do you have any troubles with like current events or could influence people and how they think? For example, we had defund the police here the last few years, and there's been a big contrast between some who want to and some who
Yeah.
don't want to. Was there any other thing that might be outplayed or larger than it should have been, you think, or do you just, nothing
Yeah.
comes to mind?
Nothing personally comes to mind. I don't know if Shelley, like if there's anything that kind of spoke to you or that you saw thematically throughout your outreach. Yeah, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Let's think about it.
Okay,
But nothing comes to mind.
curious.
Yeah.
We want to know why people so much.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a
There's a
great
story
question.
there.
I know there must be, right? Yeah. So this is great. So now we can actually kind of read through the raw data with this in mind and try and understand where, you know, where did this come from? So, yeah. Has anybody had the chance to review any of the raw data? Or did anybody have any reflections or kind of thoughts about any of the notes? Yeah.
I read through it, like you
Yeah.
said, a lot of, I could tell, like this person, they obviously live outside the city limits and they
Yeah.
don't want the bypass in their backyard.
Sure, right,
And,
yeah,
some of that and,
yeah,
but I could tell, but, yeah, these kind of, those word salad things, I don't,
Clouds, yeah.
those are not
Same
really
thing.
helpful for me because I don't, I'm kind of more like, give me, like, I'm more like Don, kind of the analytical, 30% people thought we should do this, or 80% thought that. I kind of do better with those kind of things to just get a sense for, quantity and quality and all
certainly.
that. But yeah, they were entertaining and there's a lot, I think there's a lot of common comments about, the great parks and trails that we
Yeah.
have and, traffic was, one of the bigger complaints and but the amenities, people wanted more parks and
Yeah.
stuff for people to do, recreation opportunities and things like that.
Yeah.
That was a common.
And
theme.
yeah, as I understand the having an analytical brain and then reading qualitative feedback, I definitely understand it. The vision statement is probably the most qualitative exercise anyone will ever undertake likely, but hopefully it will feed itself into some more quantitative information or at least guide some just like things with a little bit more teeth. So. All right, so clearly there's a lot of work in front of us. The next step that we're doing essentially right now in the next couple of weeks is crafting the Sandy 2050 vision statement based on the language that we're reading from this data. So we started doing that with our community advisory committee in July. We presented the same information that I'm presenting to you tonight. And we worked through we read through some of the feedback and then as a group started developing key statements organized around the 6 themes of the comprehensive plan. So we're really trying to create an iterative process with our community advisory committee and really help them take the reins on synthesizing and understanding this information and then developing the vision statement. So that is an exciting piece of work. We're going to be using what they prepared in July and then folding that into our own work with staff and the project team to develop a draft vision statement that is organized around the 6 theme areas of the comprehensive plan.
So our existing camp plan has goals. They're centered around the goals, the legislative goals that we have.
Yeah.
How is that different than the 6 themes? And what are the 6 themes?
Right, great question. So we're going to reorganize the comprehensive plan to not necessarily go by statewide planning goal, but rather go by themes that are generally a little bit more approachable to the layperson. All of the themes encompass a statewide planning goal. Actually, next time when I come to give you a briefing, I can just kind of give you a little bit of a matrix of how they all are organized. But the 6 themes are housing and economy. So we cover, goal 9 and goal 10, economic development and housing, transportation and infrastructure. So we'd be covering public facilities and utilities, a bit of the energy goal and the infrastructure or the transportation goal. The third one is parks, trails, and natural resources. That's where we can cover goal 8, recreation needs, goal 5 and 6, air, land, and water quality, and then natural hazards as well. The 4th is governance and growth management. So that's your statewide planning goal around urbanization, around land use planning and procedures. And then the last one is community and culture, which is really focused on goal 1, public involvement. So we're kind of trying to group these thematically rather than by statewide planning goal.
So when was that decision made? And I understand it's
Yeah.
trying to make it easier for the public to understand it, but when I look at the old comp plan and I want to figure out what's going on with natural areas, that's where I go to the
Yeah.
goal. And so you're making it easier for the public, which I nothing wrong with that, but I also am wanting to know how I am going to manage this. How is the
Yeah.
city going to be able to understand where we're meeting those different goals? So are you going to have 2 sets of plans, or are you just going to have one that just focuses on understanding by the layperson? Is that right?
Yeah, it'll be just one document, and it will be, we can have it so that every theme has a list of topic areas. So you can easily identify what are the topic areas and then what are the applicable statewide planning goals. because there may be some priorities that kind of float to the top through this process that don't necessarily fit into the box of a statewide planning goal, but you still want to have in your comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So that's kind of why we're seeing generally a move towards moving away from, I don't want to say it's archaic, but the statewide planning goal organization of a comprehensive plan sometimes can miss community priorities because they don't fit into the box of what that statewide planning goal covers.
So here's a question for you. Is city council going to have any input in this at all? Or is this something that the staff and this committee is going to be doing on their own? And if council does have some ability to influence that, will we get a chance to look at it before it becomes in stone?
What?
What do you want? We're having a conversation, excuse me. Well, that's her answer, then we can make it.
Oh, no, my question was, what? Review what?
So you're building this plan with a certain philosophy. How do you get this vision? I've been around vision statements a lot, and I got to tell you, they scare me, and they're usually, nobody knows what they are. So once you get past the 2 or 3 days that you're involved in. So my concern is I want something that's valuable, want something that's usable. We got 20 years, we're gonna be working on this one. So how do we make sure it is?
Yeah, certainly. So we'll be coming back to you in the fall with a draft vision statement that's built on this feedback, and then also a large community event in September. So I'll be able to report back on that, and then also provide you with the draft vision statement for your feedback. And then there are regular briefings with you, with this whole council throughout all of next year, where we'll be reporting back on the policy, like as we start developing concepts for goals and policies and having them vetted by various stakeholder groups and city departments, will come to you with that information so that you can then also review and vet throughout the entire process. So that when it comes to, okay, adoption of the comp plan, you're not seeing any new information for the first time.
And we reviewed both of the options. I was more used to the old style of
Yeah.
goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and go through the comp plan. And then 3J, I believe you had other examples you shared with us, so we could probably share them with the council. And I was like, oh, we need to go to that.
Okay.
It was just a much more intuitive, friendly, inviting document, and something that I actually, as a layperson, would want to pick up and look at, as opposed to the old way of doing it.
So I haven't had the answer yet to the question I made is, and maybe put it in a more positive intent. Is council supposed, hey,
Sorry, I am.
I know what's going on over here. I know what's going on.
No.
Okay. Is it appropriate that council moves this thing along? Or is it appropriate that the city, the large group, the 13,000 people that we have in the city, are they the ones moving this process? Is it the planning commission? Is it this 16-person committee? And
It should,
what balance?
it's just going to give you recommendations, and then you're the final body to adopt it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's.
So you have ultimate authority.
Yeah.
Finish here.
You have ultimate authority whether that you agree or don't agree with the policies and the goals that are put forth before you.
Will we have, sound like we will have steps though, as we go through this,
Certainly.
so it won't be,
Like Annie's just said, once it
Big
gets to you for
decision.
adoption, there'll be nothing new, hopefully,
okay.
that you'll have seen for the first time. You're going to see that all the way through the process.
And our hope too is that when we come to you with, let's say, some draft policy statements around transportation and infrastructure, not only will we come to you with these draft policy statements, we will also come to you with, how do we get here? Like, what did we hear? Where did we go? What kind of information did we receive? And how did we, kind of showing you all our work so that.
Real quick, though, I'm sorry, not to jump in, but I think what the real concern is we want to make sure that these draft policy statements are not showing up on our agenda the same evening that staff is looking for adoption. Like, you know what I mean? Like that we want to be updated all the way through, that it's not presented as, here are the drafts. Oh, by the way, we want you to both amend and vote tonight on it. And I think some of the questions are coming from past experiences, whether it be maybe branding projects or whatever.
Before the current staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, always.
Sure. And so I think that's kind of where some of this is coming from. And just to make sure that we're getting input, as you were talking about, Kelly, all the way through the process, and that there is some sort of deliberation after we receive some information from you, instead of wanting and I have a certain amount of control over that as well. But making sure that we're not just trying, this isn't a rubber stamp. This is council also collaborating with the community engagement and stuff that's coming forward. Does that make sense? I'm looking at staff.
And legal, I guess that's important for me too. Is it not only just the right thing, but is it the legal issue that if council is the deciding body, then we should be able to have quite a few steps until we see the end product. And
I'm gonna go a step further and say, I've been involved in city politics a long time. I've been a councilor only for 2 years, but I've been very involved in the, doing the Parks and Rec master plan and all this other stuff. And, the folks sitting up here have a better understanding of just about anybody else except for the staff as to what's going on in the, water, wastewater, the parks and trails, the sandy net, the economic development, the housing, residential stuff. And so it's really important for me to feel like I don't want to have, the staff kind of get these committees together and just, cook something up and then have it, bring it to me. And then I have to kind of say, well, I don't agree with that, or, kind of criticize it. I don't really, I would rather be more proactive and give input during the formulation process. And so that's where, I don't like this process where you guys just kind of go off and do stuff and then bring it to us. And I have to kind of, sit up here and interrupt and talk about, some things that should have been added or whatever. I want us to be more involved in kind of figuring out the recipe and cooking it up. So, because I think it's a win-win. It makes it all, makes it easier then to get it adopted at the end, because we've all been a little bit involved in it. Not that we have to be, driving the train, but I want to be on board the train.
Yeah, certainly. We've baked in at least 8, if not more, briefings with the council at key milestones throughout this process. So we will be back to you in October to report back to you on what we've done and why and how, and looking for your guidance on that. We can certainly kind of strategize, when those briefings are, so that you feel, or the council feels like they're more on that train. I also know we have a community advisory committee and would welcome any active participation on that group as well. Yeah, that would,
This is why these briefings are extremely helpful, because we're getting this input early, and we can make adjustments as we go through the process. We'll talk to staff and the team to figure out how we can be even more council involved. Sausage making before.
Okay, it's not like you're hearing our concern. At least my concern is that if we are indeed the deciding body, we should be involved in many steps rather than big goals. Okay,
Cool.
Great.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much this evening. So as I mentioned, the month of August, we're going to be developing the draft vision statement that we will come to you with in October. We'll be reviewing and vetting that draft vision statement with the Community Advisory Committee in mid-September. And then shortly thereafter, we will be hosting, and we really hope that all of you may attend, the Sandy Future Fest at the Whippersnappers Kids Play Place on Wednesday, September 28th. That is going to be an opportunity to report back to the community on what we heard from them through this visioning work, and then also unveil the draft vision statement and get some feedback on whether or not they feel like it's on the right track based on what we heard from them. And then also start moving the conversation one step further and identifying, okay, given this vision statement for these 6 thematic areas, what are some more tangible key community priorities based on this vision statement. So we're trying to move the conversation a little bit further. We're hoping that it'll be a fun event. We have the facility for a number of hours in the evening, and so folks can come with their kids. There'll be food available. So hoping to make it a little bit more fun and lighthearted and more of a celebration than just a public meeting at night. So really hope that all of you can attend. The promotion for the event will go out towards the end of August. We would really, as always, appreciate your support and putting the word out as well, and being able to attend or support as you can. So thank you.
Thank you. Like one thing I want to note, if you go to George Jensen's Wikipedia page, he was born on July 31st, 2022. So George Jensen was just born last month. And we're looking ahead of the future here.
Oh, my
you know, It's
goodness.
pretty exciting stuff. You know, at 2050, he'll be 50 years old. No, he'll be 30 years old.
This is the
No,
Jason's that
28
we're
years
talking
old.
about?
He'll be
Okay.
28 He'll be 28 years.
Don't mind his math.
That's right. I'm really bad at math.
Just to wrap
Really
up,
bad at math.
I just
Please.
think it's important for us as far as doing the comp plan that the requirement to have these citizen committees involved is a ORS requirement. I mean, so we have to have that input. We have to collect it globally and broadly. And if we were to tailor it too far away from that, I imagine we'd find ourselves in a awkward spot.
Totally agree. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks for the work. Thanks, Chris and Jan Lee. I see on there as well for participating. And I'll adjourn. We'll kind of convene and come back in 5 minutes. If you want to issue a public comment at this upcoming meeting, there's some blue forms. Make sure you provide them to Jeff Operati before we get going here in a couple of minutes. Thank you, everybody. Sandy City Council meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Welcome, everyone. It's always great to see a good audience for these meetings. I will start with a review of our Sandy City Council meeting agenda. I'll be calling for any changes to the agenda. We will then go into public comment. Please note that you needed to fill out one of these blue forms from out in the hallway and turn them into Jeff prior to the meeting to testify. We have a small stack here. Did anyone submit online today, Jeff?
No, Mayor.
Not online. Okay. So we'll go to public comment. And then after public comment, we will visit our consent agenda. In our consent agenda tonight, we have our city council meeting minutes from our August 1st meeting, as well as the special service contract program midterm report. Under new business, we have a comprehensive plan scope of work amendment discussion, contract amendment number 2, wastewater treatment plant engineering services, guaranteed maximum price approval, wastewater collection system rehab. Then we have the city emergency operations plan update. We'll then conclude with a report from our city manager, as well as our committee and council reports. And please, a reminder to our council members that we have 2 executive sessions after our public meeting this evening. One, our urban renewal board executive session, and then a city council executive session immediately following that. With that, Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilor Pietzold.
Here.
Councilor Smallwood.
Here.
Councilor Sheldon.
Here.
Councilor Walker.
Here.
Councilor Exner.
Here.
Councilor Hokinson.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. Thank you, Jeff. With that, I will call for any proposed changes to tonight's agenda.
Would it be possible, Mayor, to talk about the special service contract program separately from the consent agenda?
Is there a reason we can't just discuss it during that portion in the consent agenda? Because we're going to have a general discussion of the consent agenda and the items within.
We're not accepting that, it's just being presented.
We will be voting on it,
Yeah.
so we can choose to pull it out at that time.
I wasn't at the previous council meeting, so I can abstain from the whole thing. which is fine.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Oh, I get where you're going now.
Or just vote on it
Let's
separately.
just vote. We'll vote on them separately. Okay. All right. With that, let's go to public comment. The council welcomes your comments at this time. Reminder for those of you attending that we have these blue forms to turn into the city recorder. You will be provided up to 3 minutes for each person to speak. And a reminder that our council rules do state that you need to state your name and address for the record. I see that we have Jason Pruden, who has signed up first. Welcome. Jeff will give you a 20-second warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
when you're
thank
towards
you.
the end. Yeah.
Jason Pruden, address 39864 Stivewon Lane. So my first thing is that if you're going out of town by Sandy, by just the Sandy Action Center, by the old house, there's the big tree right there. A lot of the branches are hanging down. And so it's kind of blocking the view going further into town and also the sidewalk. So I was wondering maybe we could look at it and getting it trimmed. Second thing, I went to Bimart the other day and I had a cup I wanted to throw away and there was no trash cans on the property. And I asked for one side by Mart and I asked them, where are the trash cans? They told me the property owner got rid of all the trash cans because he was tired of all the trash.
Within that complex?
Correct,
then?
yes.
Okay.
And also I went into the Dollar Tree and they said the same thing too. The property owner was tired of paying that garbage fee.
Oh.
And there's trash everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, good to know.
And that's it.
All right. Hey, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Appreciate that, Jason. All right, next up, I see Dan Martin. Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes. You'll get a 20-second warning.
I'm Dan Martin, representing the owners of Sandytown Square, which is close to the library there. We're having a little trouble with the congregation of the homeless over by the library, and they've discovered our private part of our property, which is the cardboard recycling area, as a bathroom on a pretty regular basis now. Talked to somebody at the city and they invited me to the city council meeting. So this was the place to come. In the past, we had a meeting years ago and we discussed this problem. And at the time, I think it was maybe before Sandy Net even. And I did engage with the one guy and I asked him, hey, what draws you here? Where do you use the bathroom? He told me he uses a tree. And I said, well, not everybody. Maybe you could talk to some of the other folks. But anyway, there's no public bathroom. I understand homeless is a problem as far as moving them out. They need rest time is what was explained to me on the phone. But if they're going to be allowed to congregate there, then they're going to do what they're doing now. And after spending 4 or 5, I was hoping it was something that had happened over the Mountain Festival one time, one off, but after I sanitized it and came back the next day, I realized there was a little more ongoing. So earlier, I think it was before Sandy Net, they were coming using the internet at the library and the power outlets.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's open again, because the guy told me, yeah, they're charging their phones and using the internet. And at that time, we discussed it and they were shutting that off at night or something. I don't know if that's possible.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, and one thing to note is you may see in our agenda that we do have staff comments to the previous public comments from the previous council meeting. That allows us to get a little bit of work done and then respond at our next council meeting. I do believe we do turn the power off in that facility in the evening, but we'll get a lot better of a report for you between now and our next council meeting. Thank you so much for that. Next up, I see Amy and Tristan Hardesty. Welcome.
Hi, Amy Hardesty, Tristan Hardesty. We're at 37310 Southeast Highway 211 in Sandy. I'm the executive director at the D31 Foundation, and Tristan is the heart and soul behind D31. We're a new nonprofit in town. We focus a lot on community service, free community events, and Tristan teaches parkour to kids, hence the boot. We recently hosted National Night Out for the Sandy Police Department, and we just wanted to stop by and give you guys an update on how it went, because it blew our minds. We were expecting 150 to 200 people. We ended up having over 600 people come out to support our police department. After our expenses, we raised over $2,300 for the Shop with a Cop program, which was really exciting. That was kind of our whole goal over the course of 3 months, was to raise a couple $1,000s, and we've done that. We had 72 volunteers from inside the community serve a combined total of 712 hours to get this event going, which was really exciting to see. We had over 20 local companies donate food and prizes. Over $1,500 worth of raffle items were donated and raffled off. And so we were relatively new. I grew up in Sandy, went to high school here, moved away and came back. And to see my kids dig in here and love the community, like it's just such a blessing to see. So we were really honored to be a part of National Night Out, and looking forward to doing it again. Thank you guys for welcoming us.
So next year, you're gonna do it again?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
It was fun. I enjoyed my time there.
Thank you for being there.
Amazing turnout.
Yeah, we were blown away.
Thank you. Thank you for that testimony. And you guys did a phenomenal job at the night out. We really appreciate it. And to see you pop up all over town, and thank you for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Jason and Mary.
My name is Jason Diami. I live at 4165 Southeast This Loop. Couple of concerns. The construction on 26 for the sidewalks. They have put that down to 1 lane for quite some time. And I noticed just yesterday they finally pushed all the cones over. But we've had traffic zipping down Vista Loop at a very high rate of speed. I've called non-emergency numerous times. I've watched them almost hit the little lady that walks up and down the road. So if we could get that rectified, that would be awesome. I see that they have moved the cones over, but if we can ensure that they do that, that would be great. And then we need to open up the discussion on what's going on with that construction there.
Okay.
They're starting work at 6 a.m. They're taking out trees they're not supposed to be. They're putting in a pond down off the hill that looks like it's in the watershed there. So I'd like somebody to look into that. And I know there's others here that have the same questions. So I don't know. This is my first time doing this. So
Yeah.
well, I guess I just leave it to you guys or.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of where I was going earlier. So, public testimony here, but we're not always necessarily prepared for what we're going to get, right? And so this also allows us, we always have a section in our agenda for our staff, for us to be able to respond to our public comment or next week's or our next meeting, so that we have some time to really kind of get a good answer for you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's what I have up here for public testimony right now, if that makes sense. Okay, wanted to make sure. With that, is there any response? Did we have public testimony at our last meeting? I don't think we have any response. Okay. With that, let's move ahead to our consent agenda.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There is a bit of public testimony. My name was Nicole and Lisa Hall.
Okay, I apologize. That's what.
Lisa,
Thank you.
did we-
That's why I was looking up. And,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Lisa Hall, please join us. Yes, sorry about that, Lisa.
All right. Lisa Hall, and I live at 18265 Southeast Vista View Court. And I'm here tonight specifically to talk about the Cedar Creek Heights subdivision construction, and which I think Jason just mentioned. And my primary concern is the destruction of the retention trees. And I made an inquiry to the city last week, and that's when I learned that many trees had been removed and prior to approval. And so the developer was fined $1,000. And I was shocked when I got the notice of the penalty to learn that many trees had been destroyed, and the developer paid a paltry sum of $1,000. And many trees, I don't know how many that is, but I know along Vista View or along Vista Loop, there were 5 or 6 very mature, probably 100-year-old trees that provided a lovely shade on that street. And now it's just a shade desert. There is no shade whatsoever. And the fact that those trees were supposed to be, were supposed to remain, it's just a shame. I read an article recently about the city of Milwaukee, and they have adopted policies to put in affordable housing and also ensure a tree canopy is protected. Maybe that's a good case study for the city of Sandy. Just something I wanted to pass along. Vista Loop Drive is our neighborhood's only major street to take a walk. By removing retention trees along that street, the east half of the street, like I said, is a shade desert. And it'll take a couple generations to replace that was destroyed. Next time you're out for a walk, notice the temperature under a mature tree versus no shade at all. It's astounding, the temperature difference. And I hope that the city is considering and concerned about climate resiliency. When this development was first proposed in our neighborhood, we had to advocate to protect the livability of our neighborhood. I would like to think that the city has the same protection mindset for existing residents versus the will of developers who are here today, gone tomorrow.
20 seconds. Lisa.
Okay, I have a letter also that our dear, the old woman that walks the road, as was referenced, that she wrote. Can I leave that?
Please
as
do. Yeah, I can
evidence?
pass it around.
Yeah, so my ask is that the city would look at ordinances to protect those trees, truly protect them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa.
Yeah. Um,
Can I say comment?
please, yeah.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Without commenting on the immediate problems that you brought up, but as far as your longer term views about, climate change and being resilient and maybe developing a tree canopy sort of perspective. Earlier in this meeting, the meeting preceded this, we were talking about the Sandy Comprehensive Plan and the opportunity for community involvement, where we're setting those goals and those targets for the next 25 years. Encourage you and anybody else who's interested in that to get on Sandy Speaks. You can get on it from the city website and take that survey and provide some of that feedback and become active. You can even host a community meeting to kind of, solidify support for something like that.
Okay.
Knowing that we do respond in, at our next meeting, considering it happened last week, it sounds like there was a fine levied. Is there any kind of background that we are able to?
Yeah, we can share that with the council too. Apologies if that didn't get out. It's the one that I'm aware of is $5,000 that's been levied on the developer for lack of tree retention, fencing, and erosion control measures, and some other things in there. And then I think the maximum, I think that's the maximum penalty, right? Is up to $1,000 per.
Yeah, $1,000 per occurrence per day, yeah.
And I don't-
Per occurrence, what is an occurrence? A tree or a cutting?
A lot of the trees that were removed were actually just outside of the current natural preservation area that's in the code. I'm not trying to argue one way or the other if that area should be larger or not, but a lot of those trees that were removed on the north side of the property were just outside of that. They were fined for doing erosion control, tree removal, and other things without sediment fencing, without their tree protection fencing up. And so we did fine them. Could the fines be greater? Of course, but it's kind of a balancing act too, I think. I think the last time those fines were ever increased was, 25, 30 years ago.
So that's what I was about to ask too. So it's 5,000, but 1,000 per occurrence. So was there 5 occurrences and so we did a maximum penalty of $1,000 each?
Correct. There was 5 things that I felt they should be penalized for, which is one of the things at my discretion. And then they can always appeal it to the judge. But in this particular circumstance, they agreed that they violated those 5 provisions and they paid the fine.
And to be clear, those are our provisions. It's not some like maximum state. I mean, we can change those fines at our own discretion.
Correct.
Okay.
And was there a stop work notice issued or anything like that?
There certainly was. They stopped work, I think, for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And they did a revegetation plan for some areas that they encroached pretty close on. And they did get all their fencing up and we inspected it and approved it. And they got their 1200C from the state of Oregon like they were supposed to have. So yeah, they did do corrective action and therefore I have not felt like they warranted another violation yet. But that doesn't mean that, I'm going to keep looking at what they're doing out there to make sure they're following their rules.
It's like when we put in the code there, after we had the incidences where developers clear cut the stuff right before they annexed it into the city, we made a policy where now if they do that, they can't develop for like 10 years. And that made it pretty hard for, that kind of woke them up a little bit. In this situation though, where they're already annexed in, you want to make sure that, the consequences are great enough to prevent that asking forgiveness approach to it. And I'm not saying that's what they did, but.
Rich and the German.
I was just curious, you said there was 5, how that you felt were, well, how many were brought to your attention?
It was staff initiated. So we're the ones that noticed they were doing all this work without the proper permits and without the proper fencing. In any of these, there's some discretion. I'm sure the police department can testify this better than I can. So was there more than 5? Potentially, but I know there was at least 5. And before I issue citations, I'm one of the only people besides the police department in the city that does that. And so I want to make sure that I feel like I'm on good grounds in case it does get appealed to the judge, that I can defend our position. So I felt like there was only 5 that I could really do that on. There might have been like 7 or 8, but I felt like there was only 5 that if it went to court that I could defend us on.
Yeah, I'll just say, this being on the council and planning commission before, this has come up before where there's been trees in a neighborhood. It's been developed, building houses around it, they've knocked down the tree just because it's a lot easier to pay the fine than just didn't build around the tree. And then just ask for forgiveness later and get slapped $1,000 fine. So, and I do have to say, for someone that runs, I know what you mean by a canopy on one side. That I relate to it because is you walk down the street or you run down the street, I look for the shade in the middle of the afternoon because it is a big temperature difference. So I totally understand the.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
All right, Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You saw me shaking my head, so you know what that's about. So what I would like though, Kelly, can you and Jordan, maybe in the next council or when we get an opportunity, can we look at this? Because I feel like, I mean, just based off of the conversation, this sounds like an easy opportunity for a developer, like it's already been said, to commit an act, and it's not really a high price for them. And hey, I get $1,000 fine, not a big deal. So maybe we can look at increasing the consequences of not following the rules.
How much money's in that lumber in that tree?
I brought this up last meeting though, too, about accountability for developers, right? Because this isn't a new thing. And honestly, this sounds like a pretty egregious violation. Like to go along and just cut something that's that big, that this city kind of prides itself in. It should be, in my opinion, worth more than $1,000 per instance. And I realize I'm looking at you, Kelly, I'm not beating you up. I realize those are what's set. But I think as a council, we need to evaluate that and we need to rate up but I am asking you in all these developments, it's getting back. They're pushing that limit when it comes to work hours, agreements to use certain roads, right? They're not following through. And I'd like to see us as a city hold them accountable a lot better than what we're doing right now. So
if I could just add 2 little things. So the first thing about the trees in the right of way, if they're in the right of way and they need to be removed for infrastructure purposes, which is the case on this loop. So, they're going to widen the asphalt, they're going to put in curbs, they're going to put in sidewalks. Those trees can be removed. So it does reduce a lot of the shade, but there's absolutely 0 provision in our code that would stop us from, that I could tell a developer, you cannot remove those trees. So those were never listed as retention trees. The second part of that, the illegal access stuff, we did have one case where I find them 5 different times already, and they just keep doing it. And that code provision actually is even older. I think it's from the late 70s. And the max on that one is $500 per occurrence.
all the more reason we just need to go back.
But the noise violations is typically handled by the police department. So I just want to let you know that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it would be helpful when we have these kind of big developments starting like that, sort of like Bailey Meadows, where you kind of have a little neighborhood field meeting, kick rocks and, kind of let the developer talk about what it is they're going to do, get everybody on the same page that they understand what the operating hours are going to be, what the mitigation is for, whether tree retention or whatever the issues are, whether it's trees or traffic or, heavy equipment or access to the site or whatever it is, erosion control. Just have that kind of discussion out with as many of the neighbors that can make it, just so everybody gets on the same page and hears the same thing. And that, not to say that gets rid of all your issues, but it really helps to kind of just get everybody on the same page. And then also, when there is an issue, they don't have to necessarily call you or the police. They can kind of call the developer and start there. And then if they don't get recourse, they can come to you. So I would suggest having something like that.
Right, but we also have a noise ordinance. So if they're starting work at 6:30 in the morning, that defies the noise ordinance. So.
All right. Well, thank you. thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And let's do, I mean, let's certainly look at these because Rich is continually at our meetings bringing this up. We're hearing from community members. We need to address it. So, thank you. All right, moving ahead, let's go to our consent agenda, our city council meeting minutes from our August 1st. And thank you, everybody, for your testimony. Really appreciate your participation in our meeting tonight. Thank you. And you want to stay, please stay. Please don't feel like we're judging you for not staying. Because we go into wastewater at this point. It's not that fun.
It's real. Way to drive them out.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
stinky.
you. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and move ahead to our consent agenda with our city council meeting minutes from our August 1st meeting, as well as our special service contract program. Sounds like, is there discussion? We
The
need
only
to pull one
discussion-
out.
Yeah, the only discussion I want is on the midterm report. I really appreciate it. I think it's great. It's helpful. I would like in the future to make time on our agenda so these groups can actually come in and present these results. We don't have to do them all the same night, but we can stagger them.
Totally.
Give them a 5-minute to do, and then we can all, I think they deserve our gratitude for what they're doing.
Yeah, totally agree.
Were you on the review committee?
No.
It was you and
Carl.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the review committee
Yeah,
for them
I
to come
just-
back
yeah.
midterm.
That's what I thought. And then I also thought that we had some caveat for the funding, that if there was additional funding given to like the business recovery centers, that was going to be reconsidered in the second year. Did that happen or?
No, I think that was just at the very beginning for just that first month or two. That, because there was the unknowing of what, if that would happen during that first little section, but yeah, that's what I recall.
Well, we funded them $19,000 and then they got $200,000 from Chuck Thompson, which was great. I'm thrilled with that. But,
There's a second opinion out there about that 200,000.
Yeah. But I usually it's not a practice to go into the audience. Yeah.
I just want to state, we did not get any funding for that from Chuck direct. That 200,000 is grants that we're getting out next month.
Right.
We were given some money to help run some of this, but it wasn't. It's not what it looks like when you see those numbers. It's not.
Yeah.
What it looks like.
No, it's
It's
great.
very confusing.
Thank you. Sorry. No problem. So were we gonna separate these out? Yeah.
That's what was said.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just start with the city council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to adopt the city council meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion that we adopt just the city council meeting minutes from last meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Give me a thumbs up. Aye. Opposed nays or a thumb down. Carries. Special service contract program midterm report. Is there a motion to accept the report?
Motion to accept.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Sheldon, a second by Counselor Peasled to accept the report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays. Motion carries. All right, new business, comprehensive plan scope of work amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So this is a requested amendment to the scope of work for the comprehensive plan. I kind of explained this, I think, pretty well in the work session we had. It was maybe about an hour ago, and what the H&A would be. But to kind of just boil it down to what its essence is it's looking at our existing housing lands. So SFR, R1, R2, R3. And then it's determining how much vacant land we have, how much partially vacant. So it's basically looking at how much we can expect to develop over the next 20 to 25 years based on estimated population growth. And then if we're going to have enough residential land, in 20 or to 25 years to accommodate that potential growth. And that's what it's basically looking at. I did one of these in-house with almost no assistance. We paid maybe Kerr McLeod, I want to say like $5,000 to do some analysis work for us, to help with some sewer and water analysis for where lines could run and stuff. But I think other than that, staff did do it all in-house previously. However, it took me off and on working on it 2.5 years. And it did get acknowledged by the state and was adopted and was successful. However, even if we say it would take staff 2 years, that would not keep us on track with the comprehensive plan. And I feel it's a very vital part of what we're looking at with the comp plan, especially since, as Annie said earlier, two of kind of the themes or thematics is growth and how we kind of control that and manage that. And then one of the other themes that she mentions is economy and housing. So this has a very big interplay with two of those themes. So I think it's a really needed addition to the scope of work. I wish I would have included it the first go around, but I think we're to a point in the comp plan scope work that I've been assured by our consultant, if we add it, it won't really add any delay to the overall comprehensive plan process. I think if staff took it on, there's no way it's going to be adopted concurrently with the comp plan. So it'd be something like coming in afterwards. The other thing I think I put in here is just so everybody's aware, and I might have said this in the past, but a few years back when House Bill 2001, which is the duplex House bill, when that was passed, the state of Oregon also passed House Bill 2003. And what that requires is that every city that's in a metropolitan region has to do an updated H&A with every 6 years. And every city over a certain population, I think it was 5,000 people, outside of a metro area has to do an H&A every 8 years. So when that came out, because we had just done our last H&A, we kind of negotiated with the state. They gave us 2 more years than they were originally going to give us, but we still have a deadline of 2025. And that deadline is for the housing needs analysis to be complete, which is what you're looking at tonight, plus a new thing, because of course the House bill had to introduce a new planning process, which is called a housing production strategy. And I don't really want to go into it tonight because I don't even fully have a firm grasp of what that means yet. But this is the first step, the H&A. And then by 2025, we also have to look at and adopt a housing production strategy, which should be separate from the comp plan. I just want to make that very clear. So what we're asking tonight is to authorize the city staff to amend the scope work with 3J and add the H&A onto the scope.
So the question I have is being on C4, so there was a countywide housing needs assessment that was recently done. And we didn't participate in it because we had just recently done ours. Now I'm not 100% on this. I'm not sure who paid for the countywide housing needs assessment, and also understanding that there's different leadership at the county today than necessarily there was when they did this countywide effort. Long way to getting the question, which is there an opportunity to get on the same kind of timeline as the other communities within Clackamas County, to where are we maybe missing an opportunity to participate in a county-wide assessment where we get our own individualized report back and yet the county picks up the bill for it versus us having to go it alone and pay for it ourselves?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal point. So when we did our H&A, it was adopted in 2015. And then I believe it was 2017 or 18, the county started doing theirs and they wanted us, I believe, to pay like 8 or 10 grand.
And how much does it usually cost?
The 38,000 about.
Okay.
So, but at that time, we did not know about House Bill 2003. And so we didn't even know this was going to become a regulatory thing that every 8 years. So we declined to be involved because we had just gotten acknowledged H&A.
How long had it been before? That was your experience?
I think it
20
had been
years?
9 or 10 years or 10 or 11 years before that.
Yeah.
So we declined it, but I do think it's a fantastic idea to look into that.
Yeah, because I'm not trying to look back and say, oh, we missed
Yeah,
a
no.
chance. I'm just trying to see if we can, looking forward, if there's money to be saved, or I don't know.
I mean, it only got adopted in 2020, so I don't think they're going to have to do it for until 2028. So I don't think it's going to time with this one, but it would be a good thing to look into to maybe time with the next one.
Okay.
And I think it's a good idea. So I'll definitely reach out to the county and see.
Okay. Yeah, Kathleen.
I have 2 questions. So the first question is, again, the $64,000 question I want the answer to is how many acres of SFR, R1, R2, R3, commercial and industrial lands do we now have within the city limits, within the UGB and within UGR? Is this going to answer that question?
And how much of it's developed, how much of it's
And
partially
then, yeah,
developed.
and then
So-
how much is it developed under that existing zone, or how much of it is, not yet developed or could be developed, that it's zoned R2, but it's only a couple of single houses on there. And so it could get developed, or it's zoned as SFR, but it got developed as R1. And so should really, again, when we finally do that comp plan map, should be zoned as R1 rather than SFR, since the densities are higher there. So those are the acres that I really want to have to be able to understand how much more, zoning changes we need to do with our comp plan.
So yeah, the majority of that question, the answer is yes. So the EOA looks at commercial and industrial lands. The HNA, which you're looking at tonight, that will look at all the residential lands for the exact thing you're talking about. And that is the real big push for why we need to do it.
Acres and by development or.
By development, yeah, yeah. But I don't, the one part it's not going to do, it's not going to like look at Hamilton Ridge, for example, if you know where that is off of Sandy Heights. That zoned R3, so our highest density. We approved it as a PD and have a ton of single family homes in there. So it's not going to like look at something like that and say, it's not going to play like revisionist. It's not going to say, oh no, that should be rezoned. Because if you did that, then like I said earlier tonight, you'd be looking at Measure 49 claims and litigation potentially. And I just don't think there's any benefit of that. But it will be looking at our housing mix. So what sort of housing we have. So it won't be like saying this property is zoned this, but it actually has issues, but it will be looking at overall what our mix of housing is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I get the Measure 49 claims, but then over at Sandy Bluff, it was SFR and it got developed as R1. So it's kind of the opposite problem, which really should count towards our R1, filling the R1 need rather than, and leaving a hole in the SFR need. Anyway, okay. I just want to make sure we have that data, because that's going to be critical when we get down to the
Carl.
sausage.
Sorry. Carl. Comment to that, I think it's going to be a moving target, because with HR 2001, our density is going to be changing as somebody decides they want to increase the density, and that won't be something we can stop very well at all. My guess is it'll be a moving target. We may know what today's picture is. And at this point, I don't know if there's a whole lot of changes going on with that increased density. I'm not aware of people tearing down houses, making tries, whether it's a single in the past or adding on ADUs. But my guess is that there may be some.
Yeah, so
that will be a moving target.
a tiny bit. I do think you'll see, based on development and proposals I'm getting, I do think you'll see an uptick in new lots being duplexes instead of single family homes. But I don't think we're going to see a ton of conversions, at least not for a while, because since we passed that, like what, a year and a half ago almost, we've had one application for a conversion from a single family home to a duplex in all city limits.
Yeah,
And we've had one other pre-app on it.
Yeah, I'm not getting anything in my office that's coming through that way either. So it just was one of those, maybe it's a great idea in the state legislature, but it's not a real good idea when it comes to the on the ground where they're actually going to be able to do that. So
you will see more new subdivisions though. We're going to see it very soon here, where instead of being, say, 90 single family homes, 40 of those will be duplexes, or 20 of those will be duplexes. You're going to see a few of those popping up around San
And
Diego.
they're going to ask to subdivide the lot.
I don't know that yet.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know that, because that's a separate land use process.
After it's approved though, we'll approve the thing as a 90-person lot or 90 lot development. And then they're going to come in right afterwards. That's probably the scenario.
It'd have to have 20 separate petitions if you have them. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
We won't be able to calculate that until it happens.
You're not going to know until you get the application in. Yeah.
And those are detached duplexes.
Nope, they're all attached. Every single schematic I've seen so far is attached. I haven't seen a detached one yet. Not to say there won't be any, but I haven't seen any yet.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think the way I see it is this is good to be tackling it now. We only have a couple of years, how long it took you before, going through this process before. We have a limited staff that's already behind. We can't get behind. If we just wonder what the state will change, don't want to move because the state might change it. guess what? As long as we've been alive, they keep changing it, right? And so we can't put something in today thinking that we're gonna be, that was the last time the state's gonna change the rules on us. It's gonna happen. So what we know best today is what we know, is what we can go off of our guidance on that. But I think the timing of this, I would hate to push this back out anytime, knowing that the length of the time and being able to roll this into it. But I think back to Kathleen, your question is, this is the housing need analysis, right? This is that you brought up in the last meeting in this one. So I think this is timed correctly in where we're at right now. So, and I would propose that we move forward with it.
I agree.
Go ahead, Rich.
I agree. I just have one question on where's the money coming from?
Yeah, that was.
So my challenge to Kelly was to figure out how to fund this work.
Always gotta
ask. within our existing budget. And so we ran an analysis knowing that this is a 2-year process to complete a comprehensive plan update. And so our idea is that we'll include this amendment and then we'll have to rebudget an amount for the comp plan update in the next budget, biannual budget anyways. So we'll just have to make a note to carry over enough or budget enough to, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000 we'll need in the next budget.
I think it was on the second page here. 28,300.
Yeah.
This is like general fund then, that we're gonna say general fund?
Yeah, and that's how the comp plan.
Okay.
is being funded.
Say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Your motion.
I make the motion that we have staff authorize the amendment with 3J Consulting to add the housing need analysis scope of work.
For a second.
Second.
A motion by Counselor Pietzold, a second by Counselor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up. Aye.
Aye.
Those nays are a thumb down. Motion carries. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. All right, moving forward, contract amendment number 2, wastewater treatment plant engineering services. Good evening, Jenny.
Good evening, everyone. I always do this. Is there a screen share? Is that what I do?
Do you need to?
I don't know.
Oh, no, you're fine.
All right, I'll just read from the staff report then. Sorry. So the decision to be made is whether to authorize the city manager to execute a second amendment to the agreement with West Yost for additional wastewater treatment plant professional services. In background, in December 2020, City Council authorized the city manager to enter into a scope of services with West Yost for the design services for the wastewater treatment plant condition assessment improvements project. This is the main project that's going on currently at the wastewater treatment plant. The fee in December 2020 was approximately $500,000. This contract was amended in August of 2021 to extend the contract by 1 year and add an additional scope for the design of the tertiary treatment expansion. Amendment number 1 increased the fee to a total of $781,275. This amendment, Amendment 2, covers the following additional services. There's an extended project schedule, a number of items to do with capacity, a wastewater treatment capacity evaluation, which will be presented to the Environmental Protection Agency. But the heart of the amendment has to do with the wastewater treatment plant stress testing, planning, and implementation. The stress testing it's a large effort. It's fairly unusual, and that is the bulk of this work. And we have known this was coming for some time. It will evaluate both the peak flow and peak load capacity, and the data from the stress test will be used to calibrate the reports done previously and prepare a final report, which we submit to the EPA, summarizing peak flow and load conclusions. And this will be translated to additional capacity that this first project has attained at the wastewater treatment plant. In addition, there were additional design services that occurred during construction. It's an old plant. There were a number of different plant deficiencies that were uncovered that needed to be fixed during the construction, and additional engineering services during construction. This project, the primary driver was meeting a very difficult schedule, especially at this time. There was a lot of additional effort, 7 different packages prepared to get equipment here on time when they budgeted 3. A lot of this is, in fact, I'm sorry, all of this is truly justified. The requested amendment totals $339,741. Key considerations: the stress test scope of work is a key deliverable, which will determine the re-rated capacity of the wastewater treatment plant. And the first deliverable of this scope of work is due October 31st, 2022. Authorizing this work is important to meet the schedule milestone. I wanted to sum up as well. With this, the total engineering fee to West Yost would be $1.12 million, which looking as a percentage of construction is would be approximately 10.7% of the construction fee. Normally engineering, it depends, is between 15 to 20%. So even though we have had a lot of cost increases, it's still, within the normal ranges of what you would expect. The budgetary impact will be funded by the Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. And do I read the suggested motion? It's been a while. Sorry. I was looking at me.
Well, just a second.
Yeah, we'll just second it.
Sorry.
What's the availability of the State Water Clean Fund Act? Are we doing pretty well in terms of getting the money? My guess is we're going to have to ask for some more. Are they okay with us continually coming to them and asking?
Yeah.
For money?
Yes, this is included in the amendment, which is being processed right now. And we have also submitted a loan application, I believe last week, for a second round of SRF loan funding for the wastewater project.
They're okay with
Yeah.
that too, so.
Well, we'll see where we end up.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
There's no.
I move that we authorize the city manager to execute a second amendment to the agreement with West Yost for additional wastewater treatment plant professional services in the amount of $339,741.
A second.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Pietzel, the second by Counselor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Opposed, nays, or a thumb down. Motion carries. Thank you, Jenny. We're not going to let you off that easy, though. As we move ahead, we have the guaranteed maximum price approval, wastewater collection system rehab, Basins 6 and 7.
Thank you, Mayor. The decision to be made is whether to approve a guaranteed maximum price, GMP, and authorize the city manager to sign an agreement with Oxbow Construction for wastewater collection system rehabilitation of Basins 6 and 7. The purpose is to reduce infiltration and inflow of stormwater and groundwater to the wastewater collection system. In terms of background, the city hired Oxbow as construction manager general contractor for the collection system rehabilitation for inflow and infiltration reduction project for Basins 6 and 7 on June 26, 2022. The rehabilitation, we've covered that, will reduce infiltration into the collection system. The project will rehabilitate approximately 28,000 lineal feet of sanitary sewer main lines, 300 sewer laterals, and 140 manholes. All the work will take place in Basin 6 and 7, which had the next highest infiltration and inflow rates after Basin 2 and 8, as identified in the facility plan during the flow monitoring performed in the winter of 2017 to 2018. After completing the design with Leeway Engineering Solutions, Oxbow has submitted the proposed GMP for the Basin 6 and 7 construction. Oxbow's proposed guaranteed maximum price is $6,356,460.12. The unit prices and subcontractor equipment supplier quotes have been reviewed by the design engineer Leeway Engineering Solutions. The project completion date is anticipated to be February 23rd, 2023. Councillor Walker had previously asked what the previous Basin 2 and 8 rehabilitation project cost was for comparison. There is an amendment in process with Oxbow for Basins 2 and 8. but that construction project in total is about 7.8 million. The total, including the design and program manager for Basins 2 and 8 work, is totaling 8 million. So the construction is about 1.5 million higher than this quote from Oxbow.
Is that the same firm?
It is the same firm. The recommendation is to approve the guaranteed maximum price of $6,356,460.12 and authorize the city manager to sign an agreement with Oxbow Construction for the 2022-2023 collection system rehabilitation project in Basin 6 and 7.
So I think this question maybe for Jordan. How are we tracking with what we asked the legislature for and got granted with the 14.7 versus how we're allocating those funds? Are we pretty much tracking, what we said we would do and where we're placing that money?
We haven't spent anything yet because we just got the final documents today. And actually, I need you to sign something.
No, wait, documents to receive money? I love those.
Yeah, so it's being processed as a grant through Business Oregon, and as part of that, we had to submit a bunch of data and what we're exactly going to be spending it on. So we have a list of items. This is one of those. There's a few other things at the plant, and basically we had to account for all 14.7 of wastewater improvement. So we are, and this would be the first big commitment towards using those funds. And that's, it goes back to what our original application was, or part of that request was continuing investments in our collection system for the I-9 work and then the treatment plant improvements.
These two loans get paid off then?
This is a grant.
No, this is the $14.7 million grant we got from the state of Oregon.
Right.
That was part of the ARPA funds that the state received.
But it's not going to be used to pay for the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, it's a grant. Not a loan.
It pays for Basin 6 and 7.
Right. But it is being taken care of in these particular areas. It's not taken care of 2 and 8, though, right?
2 and 8
No.
was the SRF loan, which I think was like 1.2% loan.
Right, that's right.
And we'll have an amendment coming on that one in the future, council, just to align it with how much we actually have spent on the project.
How many basins have we done? It's losing track when we count these numbers and they're not in order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So we did 2 and 8. That was the last one. We're looking at 6 and 7.
Yeah.
I know we've done 10 because I've seen them out.
Nope.
That was that 8 then? Oh yeah, it is 8. Sorry, I'm looking at the map and the coloring. It's right.
Yeah.
They all blend
Just 2 and
together.
8.
Just 2 and 8.
Yeah.
And now this is only the
We've
second
done
one.
some smoke testing and other things.
Okay, I thought we did another section. I couldn't remember.
This is the second round.
The second round. Oh, I thought we were in the third. Bummer. But we've seen quite, in my understanding, a quite significant.
We think it's effective.
Effective decrease so far. I don't want to jinx anything. But what I'm excited about this one, from what I've known, through different things that have come up at council over the years, is this is some of the oldest, correct me if I'm wrong, oldest pipes we have in the entire city. So if any of them need to be helped out, I think when I first got on council, we were talking about something over on Pleasant or something where there were still wooden sewer lines and having to core out all these things, and it was quite a learning experience. But this could really help with but also Basin 7 is just downstream from where we just had our little sinkhole, right? Which, is No Name Creek, which goes along the same line. So we get it done before the rainy season.
Well, we're going to try, but they are forecasting to go into the rainy season.
Yeah. Anyways, no, exciting.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the guaranteed maximum price for Oxbow Construction Basins 6 and 7. Rehabilitation in the amount of $6,356,466. It's 12 cents, $12. You're right. Right. And authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with Oxbow Construction for this work.
Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a motion by Counselor Exner and a second by Counselor Hokinson. All those in favor signify by saying aye or provide me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, or thumbs down. Motion carries. All right. Well, thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on this. All right, Jordan, city emergency operations plan update.
Yeah. Thank
Chief
you, Mayor, and I'll have
Roberts.
Chief Roberts and Lieutenant Landry join
Landry, welcome.
to give the presentation. I'll just brief introduction on this. You probably saw in the staff report, updating our emergency operations plan is something that we typically should be doing, every 3 to 5 years. I think, yeah. And I think our maybe comment on is lots of different changes in administration, but also we've been managing emergencies. So as we've been updating this, I want to say thank you to Chief and also Lieutenant Landry for going through the work of updating the plan. And they'll talk a little bit about this, but this is a model, kind of a template plan that the county and other cities have used. And really the effort was to go through and look at all the changes that have happened and occurred over the last several years to make sure that the proper officials and references have been updated. And then as they'll probably also go into, we're kind of looking forward to the next steps in making our emergency preparedness and planning work and training work, building that up and getting a little more robust. We have a lot of new staff and a lot of key positions, public works director, of course, Sandy Net and finance and police. So a lot of staff to kind of go through the trainings and exercises, working with our police, our fire department as well, to start exercising this plan so that we're even better prepared for the next emergency that we hope won't come, but will someday come. So long introduction to you, Chief. Take it away. Thanks.
That was pretty much it.
All right.
You pretty much covered a lot of the stuff that I was going to cover. Thank you, Jordan, for that, and thanks, Mayor and Council. Just first off, I wanted to there's a couple things that are in here that I noticed today that were, so it is 5 years as the updates. It's not 3. So 3, 2, 5, but maximum of 5 years. It should have been. So there's a typo in there. And then if you see on the first page of the actual plan itself, the work was completed, and I just so everybody, council and mayor knows that the work was completed in September 2021. So you'll see the dates on there. If I didn't know if it was going to be a question, those dates will be changed from today's date to the 5-year period. So that will be changed. So initially in 2017 or in 2012, when this plan was adopted, we did use a consulting firm. I'm not even sure where that firm was. I wasn't really involved in that process. I was familiar with the plan, of course, in my role at that time, but I wasn't familiar with that firm. I gave this project to Lieutenant Landry. He, a lot of the credit is his. He did a lot of work on this update. And what mostly these updates were, was tracking down a lot of folks that are in new positions, making a lot of phone calls to other cities, counties, the county and who was in this position, so we can make sure these names and all these updates are right. So that was it was a lot more work than I think that we anticipated, and it took a lot of his time. So I want to thank him for, when I gave this project to him, I don't think I realized how much, that was going to be, but so I really thank him for getting that done. So we really need to make sure that we need to be more timely about this. I get that. I know there's going to be questions about that. Why did it take this long? We really need to allocate some resources, I think, towards this. It's one of those documents I think you have to have, and you hope you never have to use. A lot of the training and stuff that needs to be done with this has also been kind of put on the back burner, so to speak. I mean, at the police department, it's a little easier for us to get those the training and incident commands and NIMS, national, the emergency management system. And the fire department uses a lot of this stuff more than we do, actually. I spoke to the city manager and some of the department heads about this recently, and we are starting to work on that, making sure we get the training that's necessary for the department heads and their folks. If you got it, this is 400 pages of light reading for you all, but some departments in the city will be just more involved in some of these types of things than others will. Public Works is heavily involved in things like if we have to open up the emergency operations center, we have some kind of a disasters, some departments more than others will be involved. So their levels of training in some people will be higher than what others require. So that's something that we're working on. We want to try to maintain. And we do realize that after taking on this and making these updates, that when looking at this, a lot of cities, even like size, have emergency operations managers that would do most of this work, schedule trainings, tabletop exercises, things like that, to make sure everybody's up to speed on this stuff. We don't have that, of course, here, that luxury. So a lot of that falls on us. So we're trying to keep up with it, doing the best that we can, but there is a need for that, for having some personnel, I think, that would be dedicated to emergency operations, an emergency operations manager that would help out with these things that we're trying to keep up on. I don't know if I wanted to give Lieutenant Landry a chance to just quickly talk about some of the updates if you needed to, or if there was any questions for him about those. This plan has been in place since, it's not something new, but I didn't know.
Counselors, one of the questions I think councils may have is, what's my role?
Yep.
What do I do?
Yeah.
We know what Counselor Small would be probably doing.
I've got a quick question. So, a lot of times when we do these updates, it enables us to access grant money and different funds. And usually between the state, feds, and then FEMA, there's money there for some of the training chiefs that you're talking about. So does this assist us in being able to acquisition grant money?
We're just kind of in the beginning stages of looking at that. So as far as the training goes and other things that we need for, the emergency operations center, those things have been, a lot of those items there, we've used funds from the police department to get equipment needed for the emergency operations center if that needs to be opened. And Jordan, I was going to go into the roles a little bit. It's just that is a big question. I'm sorry, is that Counselor Smallwood?
Yep, that's fine. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And you can go through some of this plan and you'll see most of council and mayor, the roles that most of the roles that you'd be asked to have in one of these, if we had a disaster or some kind of a planned event, is mostly a support role. Obviously, if we need funding for certain things, and Tyler would be involved in that, and also the council would be involved in approving those funds and things like that. And also your public figures, people are going to ask you questions. So you need to be, in the loop on what's going on. And because you're going to get asked, the folks that live in our community, they turn to you for answers, some of these things. So
we have a couple questions up here, one with Carl and then Don.
I'm not sure if I want to take on Jeremy's statement here or not, but having been on council for a few years, I recall the last time we had what was called into an emergency. It was, we had a big windstorm here about 8-10 years ago when several roads were blocked because the trees fell down and several buildings had been damaged because of the tree fall and such. And I recall at that time, the mayor had to do some response, approve some monies and some things pretty quickly. And Mayor King was kind of surprised with it, didn't understand. In fact, he was out of town, I think, at the time and had to be called back and that kind of stuff. But I thought that the biggest problem at that time was the people that were needing to interact with it were outside the city, were almost not to be found. And those that we did find, they really didn't know what to do. And so I'm just wondering, Officer Landry, do you think in your contacts with those folks outside the city, is that still the case? Are we still really going to be fumbling? Let's say we have something tomorrow morning. Are we going to really be fumbling with those interactions, getting the equipment, getting the grant money right away, whatever it takes to make the emergency responded to? Are we not prepared?
Well, I think the wildfires of 2020, there was definitely some shortcomings in communication that was identified. And I think that those have been they're working on correcting those. So I think that we're going to be in a lot better position than say where we were during the time that you were, talking about, but also even since 2020, I think we'll be in a better position if we have another large scale major incident. If it's citywide where we're having to enact it, that is going to involve the mayor or council president or whatever line of succession you guys have in place if they're not available to be involved in declaring that state of emergency to get things rolling. But legal counsel will come into that. There'll be a lot more involved in that. So
one of the things that expand on that, I know that's been an issue that we've raised when we're talking about the plan and trainings and availability of staff to respond to emergencies. And so I know Jenny and Ryan and their crew have been looking at, radios to be able to access and contact each other for, getting into town and debris management stuff. I don't know if this is probably open yet or whatever. One thing Clackamas County cities have started to talk about is kind of a shared roster of available staff. So in the case of emergencies, we could pull on other talented staff or staff with a certain skill set to be able to work in the communities that the disaster is taking place in, which I think we could have a net benefit to be participating in something like that. Because that is a concern that we share, that something goes down, something big, can we get the staff resources here? And in the past, we've talked about, we have construction companies in town that may have equipment that we can use to help clear debris. And things. We have agreements with them. So it's sort of the next step and sort of all the ideas that start to unravel as you start talking about these things, and why the chief says emergency manager might not be a bad idea, because there's certainly a lot to talk about and do when you start opening up this box.
Emergencies are never planned for, right? They just happen. But I know being able to say, here are what things we would do, but I do remember quite a bit of fumbling. And the response to that was, three of us, myself included, ended up going to some emergency planning and try to figure out how that might look like the next time we go through something. I think that's really important, even some of the council members.
Don and then Kathleen.
Thanks. I have a number of comments and questions. I don't know, maybe I'll throw them all out here and we can decide to table, come back. I don't know where we're at on it. And first of all, just what Carl said, I'd just point out, we should plan for emergencies. I think maybe that's what you meant to say. We should plan for them. I mean, failure to plan for them makes them really bad, right? If we plan for them, then we can mitigate. So I really appreciate this approach. It's broad. It's similar to what I've seen in other areas where I worked and things like that. There are a couple of items though that I wonder if we should expand it to include that have come up in recent years that maybe weren't around when consultants put this together back in the day. So the first is, under when we talk about the the annex, the incident annexes, civil unrest. We talk about terrorism, but terrorism is defined in here is very specific to dirty bombs and things that we traditionally have thought about from terrorists. But with the civil unrest in Portland and things, it seems like we should have a plan in place to address that as well. Understanding what kind of limits are, what are we willing to do limits wise to control those situations and things and manage the quality of life. The other big one that I feel like is missing is when we talk about infrastructure and restoration of infrastructure, even having critical infrastructure in place to manage an event, is Sandy Net and its support and staff. People, the protocol for identifying whether or not you're safe or not, when you're evacuating, might be leaving something outside your door and somebody having to drive by. Well, with cell phones and lots of other things, a pretty good chance. If we have a terrible event, all the infrastructure is gone in one event. But if we have a reasonable amount of infrastructure, like the wildfires, we still have full infrastructure. Making sure that we enable and keep our communications networks like SandyNet and things available will be critical. And Jenny over there, we're building in dependencies to that SandyNet over to our wastewater treatment plant, which is another critical, so all of our infrastructure is becoming more intertwined. And I think adding that to this plan would be helpful. So when you start talking about radios for public works, radios all the way around, right? And just as one aspect. Also related to the wildfires, I think we have to tackle local citizen militias. You know, when we had the wildfires, we had reports of citizen militias standing guard and guarding properties and stuff. And there was like, was that okay? Is that not okay? I'd like to have it thought out in the plan. How do we address local citizen militias and things like that during times of trouble? How do you want to interact with them as a police, as a city, and so forth? So it's things I think to comprehend over the last few years that we've just seen. See if we can't take a look at that. There's also under the mutual aid section, there's kind of a haphazard listing, but maybe it's because there's a whole lot of other organizations we need to partner with down the road. But obviously for sheltering, we saw with the wildfires out in Estacada, some of the churches were used to shelter, not just people who were physically moved, but for the people that had come in to work. And so right now it doesn't talk really about sheltering of emergency workers who are called to the scene. So I think we need to address that and maybe look at some long-term partnerships with churches, schools, and so forth for accommodations and so forth. And there's some weird typos on 1.4.1. Maybe the PDF generator didn't work right or something.
So from PDF to Word back to PDF,
Fair
there
enough.
were some issues.
Fair enough. That's it. That's the minor one. But anyway, so that's where I think I'm hoping we're not trying to prove it tonight, that this is a feedback, but if we are, then maybe this is an interim step and the rest of this is future.
Thank you.
First of all, this is a lot of work. I've had to be involved in doing one of these before, and they don't get done often enough, and we get, names of people in there that retired, 7 years ago or something. So it's a huge undertaking. Lieutenant Landry, it's a very good job you did. I'd kind of like to direct my fellow counselors to it's the Command and Control chapter number 5. And it's on page 84, and it says the responsibility for emergency management, direction, and control of city departments in a time of disaster belongs to the elected city council. So I kind of really, I went, what?
Did you see our order of succession though? I didn't bring that one up.
Anyway, it says, and then the city manager is empowered to assume executive control over all departments, divisions, and offices of the city of Sandy during state of emergency. And then it talks about having the fire chief or the police chief be the incident commander. So I think, given that is our responsibilities, then it's really behooves all of us to really read through this and get familiar with it. Another thing you can do is there are some opportunities for even online training for incident command structure and how that works. So just so you kind of have an idea of who's doing what, operations, logistics, that kind of thing, public incident information officer, which is something I used to do on incidents. Now, the one thing that that did give me pause was the emergency operations centers that were identified. And the first one identified was the police station, and the second one was the fire station, possibly the annex. And the only concern I would have about that is that, depending on, having been at some of these incidents, especially wildfire, but also some other stuff, search and rescues and things, they take a lot of room, a lot of people, you have all these different things. And so you might want to kind of reconsider that and kind of, again, depending on the emergency, the incident, it's appropriate to do it at the police station. But then again, if people can't really be going, my understanding of the police station is you can't go over here. There's certain limits as to where you can go. You can't just have incident command teams going all over the place in there. And, maybe the fire annex, it's pretty small. But just depending on the scope, you may be including like the Public Works World Headquarters or whatever you guys call that thing. That's what we called it in our house. But anyways, so, just kind of looking at an area with a little bit more room for, because they will bring in tents and some other things. And so having an emergency operations center at the, what do you call that center? Operations Center, World Headquarters. Okay. There, but that's where you would have the room to have the tents, logistics tents and the parking and all the different things you're going to have if we do have a true emergency and all. So other than that, I thought it was a great job, and it's really important for all of us to get familiar with our roles and responsibilities on it. So and what everybody else is doing for it.
And just to add a little bit to that, Councilor Walker, is that we had talked about having the council over to the Emergency Operations Center where it's at and kind of go through, the equipment that we have. And a lot of those things are set up to where, you can't move around to certain places, but we already, we have identification for, badges for people when they do come in already made. So those things, a lot of those things are done, but I think that it would benefit council to come over. We'll set up something, they can come over and go through there, have a meeting there. And that way we can kind of walk through some certain things that we have there. So you get an idea of what's there, but you're right. I think that depending on the disaster, emergency or whatever it is, if you need that more room, you may have to move. It may happen, but, and that's something that we need to plan for, for sure.
And I would also second or third the radios, the, uniform communications, being able to talk to different agencies and all that, having those radio communications are key, especially when cell phone towers go down.
And just say thank you. It's a lot of work. It's obvious. There's a lot of pages in that, keeping it updated. When I first got on council, we went through this process with Scott Lazenby. And it was a couple day different retreats we had, and a bigger community as well with the county. I know we met the Lines with seeing eye dog location there in Boring. They have a facility. We met there once and had a bigger community talking about how did that as well as here. We went home with radios and tested them out and call each other around with the family radios back then, and it's been a long time. We have a lot better technology these days, and I know there's been a lot of stuff with the state, the federal government, and emergency response that Rich and you guys all know about. That we've worked on funding, but I think it's, I do this for my own data center aspects of things, and it does need to be kept up. It's a lot of work to do that, and this is we're gonna go through this again here in a couple of years, right? And it should be updated, a living document. But it's really good to be talking about it because some of these things are it's not the big earthquake that's happening. Yeah, that might happen. It's not the big forest fire that's happening. It's the snowstorm we had. If some of you that were here during that time, it shut our entire city down. It's the biggest disaster we've had in our community 14 years ago or whatever it was, right? 3 feet of snow landed under, and we couldn't figure it out. When we started working on some of those things and coordinating. So it's those type of things and things we haven't thought about. So I just appreciate, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but as long as it's being updated, it's the closest thing we're going to get to perfect. And that we're thinking and talking about it is the best thing for our community. And we do have a part in that. And as what was brought up back then was we run as a support, like they mentioned, being able to sign or do state of emergencies from the council's point of view. And the person in charge may not be anyone sitting over there. It may be Jenny, because of depending on what it is.
Well, so
No, but what I mean is it's who's the best person for that, what's going on at the time. And is the key point of it, and not to get like, hey, it's all about me or all about so-and-so with a title. It's about who's the best and how do we support that no matter where they're at. So it's about getting through the emergency.
So that actually helps lead to one of the questions I have. First, thank you. Awesome job. Really appreciate it. So, and thank you for pointing out that section there, Kathleen, because it reminded me of a question I had during one of our last emergencies. I think it was the fire season. And I just would like it spelled out a little bit more maybe. So, it says, I'm still on that page 84, 5.1 general. The mayor may declare a state of emergency, place this plan into effect, and activate and staff the city EOC on a full or partial basis. If one or more of these are implemented, a report of such action will be made to the city council at the first available opportunity. Then the next sentence is where I feel like there's ambiguity. I gotta read those words, ambiguity. The fire chief and or the police chief or designee becomes the IC and is responsible for performing such duties as causing emergency measures to be enforced and designating emergency areas. So is it the fire chief and or is it the police chief or is it a designee? is who's responsible for making that appointment. I think the earlier in the paragraph, it insinuates that perhaps it's the mayor that's doing that, but that's certainly not, directly spelled out that it's the mayor that's doing that. And to Jeremy's earlier point, right? I mean, does it need to be, with all due respect, both the chiefs, to Jeremy's earlier question, if it's something that has more to do with public works or whatever else, maybe, I don't know, maybe it should be, what, maybe it's my discretion, maybe not. I don't know. It goes to my earlier question, should there maybe be another, is it up to the mayor to appoint another, IC at that juncture? I feel like there's a little bit that needs to be just a little bit more clarified, because the last time we want to be having these conversations is in the middle of an emergency, right?
We don't want to be a TV show where a bunch of politicians are fighting over who's in control.
Yeah.
We want the best person to be.
I just want to know exactly what is the power and what should be done, so that we're not going back and forth on it, no matter who the future mayor or councilors are. Another thing I wanted to bring up was, so in the middle of wildfire season, Sandy High School was shortly brought up as a safety evacuation zone. And, especially in times of emergencies, you hear all kinds of stories right and left as why different things happen. And one of those my understanding was the city was asking for a lot more of a site plan proposal as to what that location was going to look like than they were ready to propose in the middle of a wildfire season. We needed the high school to be an evacuation zone, and we needed to go. And my understanding is we were asking for, where's your entrance, what's your exits, where are you going to be setting up, all these things. And so if we do declare an emergency, are there steps like that, whether it be in our planning department and others, that we can, maybe put some of our normal processes to the side and realize we are now in the state of an emergency. We just need to have, we need the high school set up. There's some steps that can just maybe go to the side. Now, there's some steps that we maybe never want to put to the side, right? But maybe just to get a little bit more into the detail on something like that. And then the final thing I would just throw out is in that wildfire incident, something came up where if we wanted the governor to declare an emergency for Sandy, I needed to specifically request the governor to do that. And so if there's steps like that need to take place, those are also the kinds of things that I'd like to see maybe added to this, so that we're not like, okay, we need to move quick. Stan needs to call the governor really quick. If I do call the governor, what am I specifically asking for? There's some of those things I saw that maybe weren't necessarily as straightforward as you would hope when you're trying to make quick decisions. So that just be a little bit of my feedback. But thank you. All right.
Go back to that succession thing. If you go back to 1.8, just to drive
What
that point
page are you
home.
on?
Which page is it?
It's page 37 or 1-15, depending on which number you're looking at. I think there's some disconnect. I don't understand this table relative to that section we just read, 5.8.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't understand what the city councilor's order of succession is.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that we have that stated anywhere.
Right.
Is it by position? Is it by longevity?
Right.
Oldest, tallest?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, we have the council president there, but after that.
Yeah, but after that, it's confusing. So I want to clarify about it.
Yeah.
I hope it's not because I'm dead.
Right. Great work. Thank you very much. Is that all you were looking was for feedback tonight?
Well,
or did
I think we're supposed to approve.
Not really.
you want to approve?
I mean, if
you actually didn't want any feedback. You just wanted us to approve.
I didn't say that either.
So I not to speak for chief or lieutenant, I think some of these things can be addressed through continuity of operations plans, beefing up, like in the annex portion, we're talking about different kinds of incidents, but this is where we can get deeper into planning of, okay, in this specific type of incident, who is the incident commander that we would drop? Is it the fire chief or is it the police chief or is it somebody else? Is it the county? Is it, their special district or something, to give the mayor more clarity on, okay, declaring a state of emergency, we're advising you essentially. It's basically, you need to appoint the fire chief as the incident command because this is a fire within the city of Sandy. Or we have civil unrest, the police chief needs to be, the incident command of that incident. So, I mean, I think what we're looking for is at least, if there's things that we can actually tweak in the plan today, understanding the kind of work to really beef up some of these sections and stuff, we can probably do that as part of like the COOP plans and other types of, addenda to the plan. But kind of have a plan that's actually updated and signed by the existing city council, sort of the priority, and then we can continue to make changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's up to you ultimately. If you want us to table it and bring back, more information for you before adoption, we could do that too.
So we could approve it tonight but to amend it within a certain time frame, come back to us with this.
Why do you want that?
succession.
What's the hurry?
Yeah.
Do we have to meet a certain timeline by the county?
I hate
or-
approving things that we know aren't.
Well,
Because here's the thing, you guys.
a few things too.
Sorry, Chief, but I just to set it up is, based on the staffing and the personalities on council and everything else, I'm very comfortable with the plan in existence as in front of us. But you don't always put these plans together based on the personality types and everything under current days. And I've seen neighboring communities and other communities in the middle of their emergencies who didn't have this good of relationships between staff and council really struggle, so that's just where some of this is coming from. That's all.
I would be comfortable, at least as a suggestion, is approve this puppy now, but expect to see an addendum that establishes at least the things that we discussed here within your time frame. But I'd like to see that addendum where we do specify those different order of successions, who's the chief, how we contact the governor, all those things.
I think those are critical to me.
So can I?
Yeah, Lori, I didn't see it, please.
Yeah, well, I think council, and some of the things that these are fluid in very dynamic situations, and you really can't have a one size fits all approach to any emergency management. So while I agree with you guys with the succession, there should be an absolute chain of command for succession policy. But, some of this, as far as like where EOCs are and some of the details that you're wanting, you just can't quite have those because some of these incidents will be small. Some of these incidents will go on for days and weeks and sometimes even longer. You can have incidences where people can't get into town, people can't get out of town. I mean, they're just, I feel like you're kind of wanting some detail that you can't always get in a plan like this. Just something to think about.
I guess that's where I'm at. It's never going to be perfect. And I think that to Lori's point, I was going to say it's just very fluid and things that are, it's what I would call a living document, something that's going to be updated as time goes on. I'd rather see it get adopted now and be put in place so that we have something that's been updated, that's not as old as the one we have. Because it's gonna take a lot of time. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can make better. It's better than it was. I mean, is it perfect? Well, no, but I don't think it's gonna ever be perfect. And so there might be some key areas where we may point out, but I think that it's
Chief Roberts.
Yeah, please, Chief. Yeah.
Oh, well, I was just gonna, going back to the mayor's question on that, ultimately, I think that you interpret those things as, reading, everybody interprets some things differently than others. But to me, that portion was pretty clear that the city manager would be in that position to, so that's just an example of a lot of these. And this original plan was, when we did the original plan, of course, a lot of FEMA has a lot to do with these plans and how they want these things structured and stuff, like that. So, Councilor Pizza, you're right. It's not really tailored to exactly everything that we have here, but a lot of those things are purposely a little more broad in the plan. where it can be fluid, it can change if we needed to change things. I just wanted to point that out.
So what page, correct me, and so that, okay, and I'm for adopting this tonight, but it kind of goes directly to my point. I mean, to me, that section is not clear that it's the city manager, and that's kind of the point, right? Is now we have all the time in the world right now to have that conversation. But in the point of an emergency, if I want to appoint a separate, IC than what Jordan does, I'd really like to not be fighting about that in the middle of an emergency. I mean, that's my
I
only
understand.
thing.
I would have a hard time voting for this. I would vote for it if I knew that we were going to have an amendment coming up sometime soon that described, at least in context, what these kinds of decisions will be made and how that process works. I don't want to stop this. This is great.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do want to see us just at least have them written out. There's more than a few times. And like Kathleen, I've been in a number of crises where you have to make decisions right away. And there's nothing worse than having to sit there and say, am I in charge or you in charge? How that gets through. And it's not just personalities. Many times it's a matter of authority. Who has the right to be able to commit funds? Who has the right to be able to direct traffic and other employees? There's a fair amount of stuff that should be covered in that. And so I would want to say, let's get it approved, but let's get that amended so we can figure out what some of these things are.
And not to belabor it, Chief, because I agree, right? You go to emergency manager on page 52, the city manager designee serves as the emergency manager for the city. That is absolutely clear. What I'm talking about though is in just that page just above that though, it says that the mayor designee, staffs the EOC. Now, is that just, that's the only thing I'm looking for, is just a little bit of clarity as to how it happens. Other than that, we can adopt this and fix that. That's fine. I'm not looking to belabor that. I just want to make sure we have.
Yeah,
clear stuff.
well, go ahead.
Well, we can also, some of these are, I think, clarifying questions and more information we can bring with an adoption if we need to make tweaks. Some of them might also be in, extraordinary powers kick in when there's a declaration of emergency. We may activate the EOC. We don't need a state of emergency. We just want to activate the EOC and have a command structure that's easier to manage an incident that's maybe really localized or something. So different kind of
Like a sinkhole.
Yeah, like a sinkhole maybe, or some, with the fire, for example, the wildfires, we had sort of an informal EOC at the fire department, and we combined our PIOs and we managed that way without having to do a full activation of the EOC. So those are some examples. So and maybe we just need to go back and do some more homework and clarify some things before it's more adopted.
So I brought up a lot of things, and there's a few others nitpicky things. Some of them may be smaller lot. I don't need them all addressed in the specific version. I do think, though, that there's power in putting something out to public review and getting feedback, a broad set of feedback, and then bringing it back a second time. Both for the writer, who's now you're getting all these different perspectives and seeing things maybe a different way, but also for us to see it on multiple occasions. It may be the difference between creating something that's a workable process and procedure that gets in our heads as opposed to shelf art that we lose and just collects dust. So I would prefer that at least the few of these, the ones we're just talking about, to me, they're critical and they shouldn't take a lot of time to fix. But I would prefer to see it brought back with a few of those things fixed and a listing of these topics that we can't get to. Because I don't want to lose those things, so that the sending an infrastructure part to me is important, not important enough to hold up a vote for a current version 1 or version 2. And I'd also ask that if you bring it back, that it comes back in a red line so we can see what's changed.
I think if it comes back, I think we should set a date. The next city council meeting. I think this is important enough, especially right now during fire season, that we don't hold it. If we're not going to vote on it today, I'd like to see it next city council. And I don't mean to put work on anybody's shoulders. I don't think what I heard is asking, but more than a couple items change. Because I'd rather, it's never going to be perfect. So I think if we want to do that, have a couple things that should come back at the next city council meeting.
6th of September, I think.
Sometimes fall.
What's that?
Yeah, we can bring it back. It probably won't be the 6th of September, but maybe a little bit later in the fall.
I guess that makes,
What's the
I guess
issue
that
about-
makes me more nervous just because we're right in the fire season, so.
Yeah. To Jeremy's point, what's the problem with approving it tonight, knowing that in, let's say, end of September, you come back to us with those addendums? That gives you a chance to at least work underneath a current emergency plan. If something does happen, we're entering the fire season, for example.
I think the primary things, and speak up if I don't have these right. There's a couple things that are bigger, I think, additions that we need to work on, the civil unrest plan, for example, or
They need more, they'll take time.
yeah, those will take a little more time to add in. But the order of succession question is a good one. I mean, we can come up with some sort of way to calculate that if you guys like. The command structure question, clarifying, when the mayor versus the emergency manager selects or chooses the IC. We can almost make some wordsmithing changes right now, but we can redline those and bring it back. And then the question about declaring an emergency, having the governor and how to make that request too. And then the mayor also had the question about suspending certain permitting requirements during states of emergency.
Another question, because you guys brought up some good points. And does an establishment of like a evacuation center, like the high school or something, is that is that Sandy's to do, or is that like the county decides that? And then the second part of that question, because those are the things that kind of came up to bite us before, but like the evacuation routes and how the 211 and 26 were just gridlocked and people couldn't get in and couldn't get out, and is figuring out how that could go better next time part of this process, or is that dealing with ODOT and some bigger fish, higher
Yeah.
level, or what?
Yes and yes. So before we had the pandemic, we were in the process of working with the county of working on evacuation routes, and that included ODOT and things like that. Those things are starting to ramp up again since we had to table those exercises that we had planned. Because of COVID, we couldn't get together. So a lot of those exercises, which we had some rather large ones that were really in the later stages of planning. It's really unfortunate that it happened, because we're going to have to start some of those all over again. There's just no other way to do that. A lot of people have moved on, but an answer to your question is, depending on the type of emergency evacuation routes, a lot of those things we've worked on, have been working on, are still working on, and just continue to do so almost all the time. It's in some capacity with the county, the state, ODOT, and other agencies on these things. So it's not like we haven't been working on these things, those routes where we can use where we can hold people, where we can, if we have a shelter, where is that going to be? These things, a lot of those things have been worked out already or in the process, and we're just kind of getting started again after COVID.
Is that those become kind of appendices to this plan?
Excuse me. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, we can take care of whatever the council wants. If we want to come back, that's totally fine. We'll, however you guys want this to proceed, we'll make it happen.
How about make a move that we approve it with the knowledge that by the end of September, we come back with some of these modifications?
Yeah, I mean, we're updating the current plan to this plan. I don't know why we can't do that.
Well, we have a plan, right? I mean, like, it's not.
How defunct is the old plan?
It looks a lot like this one.
Yeah.
Just with some outdated
Yeah,
names and
Okay.
incidents and
that's fine.
We're not
references.
operating in total.
Right.
Yeah, right. Just-
Yeah. Yeah, we'll bring it back.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for your work on this. Really appreciate it. Presentation. It's great.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Next time.
Yes, it will, promise.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes, all right, report from our city manager.
First, I want to introduce a new face, Josh Soper. Barry Elsner is newest attorney with the firm, 3 weeks, I think. on the job now. Yeah, so.
That explains the tie.
And the no tie.
Josh, if you want to come up, I'll do just the brief introduction. Josh was most recently the city attorney for the city of Sherwood. And then Coos County before that. And so definitely has experience working in a community that has growth challenges and kind of, on the outskirts of the urban growth. And he will be, I believe, our primary.
That's correct.
Lives in Damascus, so I think got here in about 12 minutes, which is great for us. And Chris and the other attorneys in the firm, I'm sure, will continue to be available as needed. So appreciate all their help on everything that we got going on. Anything you want to add, Josh?
I think you just about covered it. Yeah, I've been the city attorney in Sherwood for the last 7 years. Before that, I was county council in Coos County, and went to law school at Lewis and Clark and did my undergrad at the University of Michigan. And very happy to be with BEH now, and happy to be working with the city of Sandy.
There is one thing I would like to point out that now it's obvious that when Josh was at Sherwood, he was the city attorney, which means he's the only city attorney. So no matter what came up that day was Josh's problem. Employment problems, contracting problems, land use problems. Josh had to deal with everything. So he's really well positioned to serve.
And now at BEH, I have the benefit of the brain trust. When there's something that is more complicated or in depth, I can consult with the rest of the other attorneys.
So I was going to ask what your expertise was, but it sounds like it's all your expertise.
I've done everything. I'm going to be focusing my practice mostly on land use, but still continuing to do all the general government issues as well.
Great. Love that.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Yes.
Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, that's right. Couple of quick things. Hoodview has requested early pickup this week due to the heat. It seems to be a common trend these days to get the haulers out there earlier. So we've sent out some communication and they're working on it as well. We encourage folks to set out their cans the night before, at least by 4 a.m. If they're going to be doing early pickup later this week.
How did you inform people of that? Because this is the first time hearing about it. So
today we just got notice. So it went out on
Facebook today.
and
I'm sorry.
I
For
know.
someone that's missed their pickup because of that twice, putting it out way before 7 a.m. when my morning runs, and it's already been coming. Other people, I mean, it's just having a little bit more of a leeway on that is going to be.
Yeah, we're trying our best to get them to
This hasn't
communicate better. I think
been
there's
an
only
issue
like
in
one person.
Years of seen this, so that's why I just.
Yeah. We continue to tell them. When
Well, I
these things
guess-
happen, tell us.
I guess
early
we
so
do have a
can get the
new
word out.
hauling company. It's not the same company we had before, just the same name.
Same drivers.
Yeah.
Different management. So, when we talked about them selling and when we were doing the negotiation of that.
Yeah, so the request comes to us from Hoodview, but it's actually Clackamas County putting out that request to all the waste haulers within the county to start service early due to OSHA requirements with heat advisory. That's the big driver of it. Because the heat index gets above 80, and then there's all the rest breaks and the shade and water and that OSHA has bestowed upon us to make sure that we manage and make sure that all our employees are staying safe in the heat. So this will probably not be anything that changes going forward with those heat advisory warnings that are out there, and the county making that request to the haulers and the haulers making the request to the cities. Of course, we could probably say no, but we're also trying to act in good faith with those waste haulers that they're, out of the direct sun and the peak heat of the day earlier, and trying to keep themselves safe and,
admittedly that not everybody has the technology, but surely we have the ability to send out a massive email send. I know there are people who don't have emails. We don't have it, but we've got a fair amount of folks that are out there with emails. Something like this would be something that might be better than Facebook. But frankly, I look at my Facebook a couple, 3 times a week. It's hard to keep up with it sometimes. I don't even want to look at it sometimes. And maybe technology might help us out. It may not be an email, but maybe it's something else that we could use.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain Hoodview has an app also now, which the information should have gone out through that mechanism. I don't have the app personally, but
I can find that out tomorrow.
Pretty sure that's not high on my list to download.
I actually do have the app and I don't see it. So that's when you mentioned before. I'm like, I already have the app, but there's no things coming on it. You know, it's anyway. Sorry, I don't mean to harp on it, but I'm just a little because to your point, not everyone has the ability or going out and looking on our Facebook page. You know, future days coming ahead, right? Like so.
You do set your counts out the night or the morning of.
Yeah, because otherwise they get hit over or wind blows over, so you don't put them out the night before when you've had that issues happen, right? Like
I do.
Always done it.
Put mine up the night
So
before.
I did this last week, but you know, different times of the year you have but you should have it up before 7 a.m. So anyway, I'm just saying that I'm not the only one either, so.
Yeah. Think so.
But if there was a better way of communicating that out, you know, they do have access, you know, to people that have billing and that type of thing. They could email out, or they could, you know, these other things, we'll call it, you know.
So many people have bill pay now, you know, can you submit a telephone number or something for a text message?
Correct.
Or
Right. Just like flash alerts, like we have for storms, you know, just giving some suggestions that, you know.
Our emergency plan.
Okay. I want to say an early congratulations to Andy and Muna with our transit department. Again, they just know how to get them. They applied for a grant for expanding our electric vehicle, or actually buses in this case. We have one grant already, and we did receive word that we're successful. I think it's like $1.2 million to purchase 2 buses and the electrifying infrastructure. So I know this was kind of one of those goals that you adopt in the transit master plan, you know, when we did that 3 or 4 years ago, and already be at the point of having 3 coming into our fleet soon is pretty amazing. So a lot of kudos to them for seeking those out and finding them and taking advantage of all the funds that are kind of circulating around out there for this type of infrastructure. Also kudos to our Parks and Recreation Department. You know, right in the middle of all these events, they're just working really hard, putting in a lot of extra hours to make sure they're successful. I've been super impressed with just the attendance. I think the council had you guys had the foresight to know that coming out of the pandemic, people were going to be hungry for this stuff. And sure enough, I mean, record attendance at the Mountain Festival, but also all these concerts and the movies. Like, I think 2019, we had, you know, it was in the, you know, just double digits, like 30 or 40 people, whatever. It's like hundreds, like 500 people at these concerts. So just fantastic work. And they helped out with the employee picnic, which was great last week. Longest Day Parkway, just doing a great job on these events. So,
well, and I just to pile on that, you know, it's not just that people are wanting to come out. That's a big part of it, but I think there's also a strategic decision made there to kind of up the quality of, you know, the performances that were going on. You know, you can always say, do we want to have 5 concerts at one level or 2 really good ones with trying to build momentum the more on. And so I think our neighbors and stuff were really excited to get out. I wanted to give kudos to the leadership going on over there to, you know, change it up a little bit, not just, you know, recycle and repeat. And I think we're just getting some really good stuff. So I just wanted to pile on.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Exactly. A couple of things that we've sent out this week. The request for quotes on the grease interceptors is that FOG program that we've really been working on. The council allocated ARPA funding towards getting these in place for the remaining restaurants and businesses in town. This really does help with the treatment process down at the treatment plant. So that's out. And then the program manager for the wastewater and water programs. This will be a big one, a very important one to manage a huge portfolio of expensive projects over the next 5 years. So this is, you know, our owner's rep that we have. This is basically a big expansion upon that kind of concept where it's an actual program manager to help us manage these really complex and expensive projects. So that's been issued and that's out. And then something that is also police related, since the chief and lieutenant here, we're working with the school district, as the council knows, on that school resource officer contract renewal. And I know council, we've talked about having like maybe a meeting with the council to kind of brief you on that process and negotiations. So kind of reaching out maybe after this meeting, touch base with the mayor, maybe Councilor Sheldon. I know Councilor Hopkinson as the school district liaison was interested in that as well. That contract did expire. We're coming up to a new school year. We've had kind of a challenge to negotiate this over the summer, but I know they'll honor the existing contract until we have a new one in place. So, and that's it. I know we got more left on the agenda.
Yeah, we do. All right, well, thank you. Don?
It's a busy night.
Yeah, Carl?
Just real quickly, I'm gonna, because of some frustration, I'm gonna report that the art committee is not meeting. So I would like to see that when it's been a couple of years now. So my report, I think, will include that this, as I go until I see another start, that the art committee has not been able to meet. So one thing that I will say is related to these trees that we're talking about. At one time, I was attending a tree committee that was talking about a lot of these same kind of subject matters, and it was canceled because of the pandemic and all the frustrations and all the busyness that was going on. So it might be worth it to relook at that and see if there's to start that back up again, if indeed the council is concerned about it. I personally am very concerned about tree crown limits and percentages over the city. I think it's really a crucial piece to do that. So in the evidence of getting it quickly done here, one last thing is I'm leaving tomorrow night. I don't want to hear a phone call. I'll take a look at my emails, but I'll be back on the 27th in time for the weekend. So other than that, have a good couple of weeks. That's it.
You as well. Kathleen?
I think after, we saw that group come, because the development, and it's just now, just getting started out there. I really want to just kind of reiterate the helpfulness of having kind of a community field review of what's coming, because, it can really kind of maybe mitigate some of the anger and frustration. And, some people are just hearing the, equipment for the first time. They didn't know what's going on. So just kind of bring down the anxiety levels a little bit of information, and just being out there talking to people face to face is really a helpful approach to it, I think. I agree with the retention tree stuff. I think it is something to work on to try to kind of make that a little bit more, I hate to say punitive, but at least preventative, kind of like, how can we make this a win-win to, encourage them, and, having a stop work order for a certain amount of time, time is money. And so if they get shut down for, a certain time, and there's fines, then that's also helpful, I think. One thing on the buses, I'm also very, we've got expansion plans proposed for the Public Works Operations Center. There's the Public Works part of it. There's the need for Sandy Net to have somewhere, and then there's the whole transit thing. And transit folks just knock it out of the park with how much they're able to get grants for and everything else. I just want to be mindful of, when one program in a particular area keeps adding more buses and all that, needs more room, that affects the ability for the rest of the other departments. So just kind of keeping that in mind, and understanding the future needs that we have there, and not losing sight of that. The concerts, to reiterate what the mayor said about, just really high quality events, and just had a blast. I know the recreation event coordinator, and also she was doing the sports league coordination stuff, that sports team, they just had some excellent organization on organizing those sports leagues. And I know people were so excited to be back playing, softball leagues and things like that. So really happy that went off really well. And then the last part I will add about the Gresham, about the police, school resource officer contract. I was reading something today about, our last week about, I guess, the Gresham School District, the Gresham Police Department decided not to support their school resource officer at the Reynolds School District, I believe. And so I just kind of looked into that a little bit. I looked in that article, and they part of it, I think, was the Reynolds, one of the schools had kind of said that they didn't really like the job they were doing or something. There was some kind of something there, and I don't know if that's kind of was the reason for it, but the Gresham School District was paying between $109,000 and $119,000 for each of 5 officers, 4 Multnomah County sheriffs and 1 Gresham police officer, I believe. Don't quote me on those numbers, but I do know the 109 and 119,000. There's over 119,000. It's almost 120 for each of those school resource officers. And so when we talk about, the need to have more police officers, I'm totally supportive of that, and trying to get as much of the traffic position covered and all that. I just feel like the benefit of having those school resource officers is huge, but the benefiting community is more than just the city taxpayers. It benefits the Boring residents, everybody that lives up the mountain. They all benefit from those school resource officers. So I am really strongly encouraging us to, have the school district be similar to the Reynolds folks who are paying what it much closer to what it actually costs to have those school resource officers in the schools. I'm supportive of the program. I just want to make sure that the right folks are paying for it, and it's not, that we're not having to kind of rob Peter to pay for the program. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, out of time, I will, I'm gonna pass real quickly though. I already said what I said about the development thing earlier, so I won't keep that up. To Kathleen's point a little bit though, I would like to, just for an education purpose, usually when you pay for reports that's how much they're paying. So when you look at the cost, that's including insurance and PERS and all those other costs. So I think once you start looking at what we're doing, knowing how much I don't know how much a Sandy officer costs. I don't know how much other places cost. And so I think you're probably in that ballpark of where they are paying as well. So.
All right, thank you. Lori.
Yeah, I've got a couple things here. One, I want to second what Carl said about the Arts Commission. Estacada has been doing all sorts of chalk art stuff all summer long with kids and local groups, and it's generated a lot of discussion in our outlying communities. And it's very sad to me and disheartening that we don't have an active commission that can organize some of this stuff that generates so much excitement in the community. So I'd like to stop talking about this and move forward with it. And then second, I have some questions, and this is more of just maybe Jordan for another night, but maybe make a note. We ask people as a community to put trees, or we ask developers to put trees in people's yards. Then when these trees get too big and they cause root damage to sidewalks, then we make the homeowner get permission from the city, buy a permit, and have to take the tree down. And this to me doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why we do this. I've got 2 neighbors going through this right now, and they're very frustrated. So I think that's something that we need to look at as far as what we're asking developers to do with trees, where they're located, and then putting that onus on a homeowner down the road to take care of that because it's causing property damage. I think that's our fault as a city. That shouldn't be the homeowner's fault. So those are my 2 things tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate that. Jeremy.
Yeah, first off, the fluff light at 26, I know you put out a statement there. Actually, on my way here this afternoon, I got a phone call about this, saying that only a car and a half can get through that light, and it took 20 minutes while sitting at that light. I know you guys made some comments to ODOT last week, but
I didn't hear from them today. I know we're still having problems with it, so.
Did you hear from them today?
No.
Because I
haven't.
played phone tag with
Did
Ryan,
you?
but I didn't connect with him.
Okay.
He called me this morning. Sorry.
no, it's like, the statement was, I'm just one person, but you're the city, so you should have, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
but they're ODOT.
Yeah.
It's like that railroad.
So Ryan's our region one, so that's what I called it.
Thanks for
Ryan.
laughing. That's-
I got it.
You got it, yeah. We have one other railroad person in here. And then it's great to see 362nd Bell Street. I see that they're actually getting right up to Highway 26 there. Today, the barn part of it, it's been removed, the red one there, and making progress on that. So that's great to see there. When do we think the sidewalk here down to Vista Loop? What's the scheduled time on that? It looks like we've opened up the one of the lanes that's been closed for months. That what's I've been asked many times by people at Vista Loop specifically.
End of October was last time.
This year?
Sorry, and when is it gonna be completed?
Yeah.
If this is the ODOT sidewalk project we're talking about,
It's
and
kind
the
of-
closure on 26, the last time I looked, it was, I think in January, they were having some problems with the stability of the retaining wall, which I think is.
I noticed that they opened up their lane, so I thought maybe that part was got some progress.
I have.
Anyways, it'd be nice for an update for the council to have an idea so that we get asked, we can have at least an updated version of it.
Is that substantial or?
Yeah, just something up there. I mean, I just tell them, I think there's a lot of confusion that, no, it's a city project. I'm like, oh, this, well, partly, we wanted it, yes, but it's being ran by ODOT and not by the city. So in that aspect of things. And then just a reminder that Hood to Coast is next week, not this Friday, but the following Friday. So it's a major worldwide event that's happening that goes right through our town. So those watching that many people are watching right now, but be careful out there with the runners coming by even into way late into Friday night. So they aren't all done by noon. So just be cautious of the runners.
All right, I'll keep it brief. Just shout out for the electric buses. That was awesome. Of course, the music and movies in the park have been spectacular. We've talked about that. This last weekend, I had the opportunity to go to the mayor's conference and collaborate with fellow mayors around the state. That was just an outstanding opportunity. One thing I wanted to ask Jordan, just let you guys know, I was requesting this of staff, is so Kaiser Mayor Kathy Clark and Happy Valley Mayor Tom Ellis both kind of cornered me on the governor's climate action rules, stuff that's going on right now, and the rulemaking in particular being very hard for growing cities to try to deal with. They're actually organizing some sort of action. I was hoping that maybe you could reach out. Tom mentioned, Mayor Ellis mentioned, Jason Tuck is kind of leading that over there at Happy Valley. If you guys could maybe see what they're doing and then report back to council in an email or something, just so we're aware, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. And then while there, just to close out on positive note, ran into former Senator Betsy Johnson, who made me think immediately of Carl. She just said, man, do I love those flower baskets driving through your town, and how nice downtown's looking. So I just
Those
thought I'd
islands
mention
look
that.
really good, all mowed down and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Just in time for her quick drive through our community. So that was nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think
Really
there's a
makes-
good-
That's right.
The barriers on all the.
With that,
sidewalks.
I'll go ahead and close out our meeting as we have a couple of executive sessions to go into. Thank you, everybody.